Hey guys, welcome. What if Neglected Naruto wakes up Orochimaru for his secret powers movie? But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. A teen sat on a stool in front of the throngs of listening merchants and their children, captivating them with his tales and adventures. This teenager was a pale blonde-haired boy with pitch-black goggles fixed on his forehead firmly. His eyes were equally black but with vulpine-red pupils that didn't intimidate his eager audience, seeing as he had been part of their society for 6 months. This blonde storyteller wore long-sleeved black shirt with a slashed Konoha hitate on his right arm and black Anbu grade pants, with a camo red scarf wrapped around his neck comfortably. He also had on thick red ninja grade boots that reached only to his ankles, and a pair of red gloves on his hands that waved around, showing all what he had done in one of his many adventures. The person was equally almost as pale as the softly dropping snow that almost eternally fell around Yomisaki Mountain. Even though the country it was situated in was not known as Snow Country anymore, this person placed a hand on his thigh and leaned in, raising his other hand in a claw. Then the marsh fog monster raised its venomous claw and brought it down on me. The raptly listening audience gasped at what he had said. Some of the female adult populace even leaned back abruptly and held their hearts. The storyteller nodded to confirm what he had said was true. His hands were the size of an adult snow tiger and their venom is known to take down 3 brown bears with no problem. "What did you do, Naruto-san?" a black-haired child asked from the front row. Here the person beamed at the child, then to the audience, displaying his super serrated teeth for all to behold, but again they didn't recoil from him. Rather, they perked up even more, if that was even possible. Well, I whipped out before he could continue. He paused and leaned to his right. A black-haired female with a katana sheathed on her back bent down to whisper something into his ear. She wore blaringly white pants and short-sleeved shirt but with a light blood-red long-sleeved coat with thick fur protecting her neck from the soft chill that blew through the merchant village. The rogue Konoha ninja quirked his eyebrows at what his friend whispered to him. "Are you certain?" "Very. They're just 50 paces behind the crowd." The blonde looked over the perplexed audience and saw what, or who, his friend was warning him of. 2 people wearing black with red clouds cloaks. One had blue skin and shark-like serrated teeth that glinted at him. There was a quivering thing on his back. The other person was dusting his nails on his cloak and raised them to his orange-masked face. Naruto smiled widely at his listeners and spoke up. "I am very sorry for this, but it's that time of the week again." The time he usually spoke of was when missing ninjas arrived in their village and attempted to collect his hefty bounty. Rather, though, this time was very different. It was the Akatsuki that had finally found him. The children moaned sadly and pouted. The adults, though, shook their heads in exasperation. "Do you really have to go?" An adorable 4-year-old girl with her blue hair set in cute 2 pigtails said. The girl had her arms crossed stubbornly and kept the pose even when a middle-aged man with gray-blue hair picked her up. The other children too were being picked up by their parents. "They won't go away if I don't talk to them," he air quoted. The girl sniffed and nodded, but it was really only the adults that understood what he meant. The merchants and their children were now packing into the small, humble houses Naruto himself had helped build when he had arrived, though another middle-aged woman with gray-blue hair stuck behind when her daughter and her husband were inside their house. The woman frowned worriedly. "Don't make too much noise." Naruto waved his hands flippantly. "It's nothing the kids haven't seen or heard me do, lady." The woman agreed on that point and was gently ushered back in by Naruto's katana-wielding friend. "Don't worry, ma'am. Well, try and be quiet." "Thank you, Aoki-chan." The woman smiled at her and shut the door. The woman named Aoki turned back to the blonde teen and shrugged, making sure to unstrap her katana with the sheath and hold it in her left hand. The woman walked to Naruto's side, standing behind him protectively, and held her katana in a ready stance. Naruto, though, stood straight with his arms crossed. His camo red scarf blew in the wind ominously. The 16-year-old boy cocked his head to the side when Toby took a step forward, not close enough to lunge at the blonde but enough to show that the masked man was the leader of the duo. "You are a very hard person to find, Naruto. I've been told that a lot." Naruto replied with a small shrug. "So you're here for the Kyuubi?" Toby didn't even seem the least bit surprised. "Well, yes, that's exactly why we're here. So would you be so kind as to not resist? We don't want to destroy this nice place." "Oh, you don't have to worry about that. This place is pretty bomb-proof." the boy said with a small smirk. He had tested the buildings himself. Now to get all formalities aside, I will not leave with you. You two will not leave alive, and I will use your dead carcasses to feed my little friends. He smiled a little wider at them, a perfect image of childlike innocence showing. Kisame snorted, but still unlatched his sword from his back. You don't mean that. You obviously haven't been reading the bingo book lately. I recommend the Iwagakure bingo book. Then Naruto snapped his fingers as if he was just realizing something. Oh yeah, and I'll be taking your Sharingan and Samahata too. I almost forgot to say that. It happens to everyone, Aoki said to him, very much used to her boss's habit of intimidating his opponent before he really attacked. Don't say I didn't warn you, Tobi said. Naruto hunched over a little and 2-foot-long senbon slid out of the hidden senbon launchers strapped to his forearms under his sleeves. The lethal needles grazed the ground, and on contact a purple liquid dripped from them and fizzled on the ground. Without hesitation he and his partner darted to the 2S rank ninja. Little did Tobi and Kisame know, or despite the fact they had severely underestimated the Uzumaki rogue ninja and his rogue samurai partner, they were in for a world of surprise that the rumors that they had heard flitting all over the continent about the boy were indeed true. Naruto Uzumaki was a very capable shinobi. He had been trained by the Snake Sage herself, which was enough proof he wasn't to be trifled with. Team 7 with Yamato, Kakashi and Jiraiya just managed to run in time to watch the epic fight between Naruto and Aoki against the few last Akatsuki members. Flashback Chapter 1. They were staring again. Naruto, donning a hoodie that was 2 times bigger than him and a pair of black shorts, shuffled through the streets of Konoha, his hood hiding his eyes and some of his hair, leaving his frown to be seen by all who were near and some flecks of blonde hair sticking out of the sides. There was a small bulge in his chest area where he hugged a jar to his chest, a small skittering creature scampering inside impatiently. The 5-year-old boy never liked walking in public view, but the great distrust he had apparently garnered for something that was out of his knowledge had the Hokage place his apartment at the very edge of the residential district, where he would have no other option but to walk a few paces in full view to anywhere he was going. The frown on his mouth deepened, a facial feature one of his age should have, but one he wore mostly when others saw him. The boy wanted to hiss venom at the old crones that were whispering as he passed, not even having the decency to do so behind their hands or even out of sight. That boy, he's trouble. Tell me about it. Why does Hokage-sama still have him around? They say he even keeps dead bodies in his apartment. The sadistic little devil. Kami have mercy. The blonde child hugged the jar closer to him and walked faster away from the insistent gossiping and whispers that followed after him like a stubborn fly. He had been living on his own for as long as he could remember, and as far as he knew he hadn't given any of the citizens of Konoha any trouble whatsoever. He had kept to his own and had provided for himself without any help. Naruto walked through a training ground, making sure to pass the very edge so that he wouldn't disturb the genin training there, and entered into the tree line. The boy softly padded through the forest, the dry leaves crunching under his worn but well-maintained black sandals before he stopped under a tree that had a trunk that was twice as thick as an average man but was at the same time only 3 heads taller than Naruto. The boy liked to humor himself by calling it a tree only because it had some sparse leaves on the trunk. It looked like a spike that had shot straight out of the ground that just happened to grow roots and also had some leaves sprouting out from the upper side of the trunk, where branches were supposed to be. Naruto grunted quietly and knelt down beside this tree. He brought out the jar he had been hugging to his chest without anyone knowing. He flipped his hoodie off, revealing the thick black goggles with pitch-black lenses that hid his eyes perfectly, lifted the jar to his eyes and peered into it with childlike curiosity. The lenses of the goggles seemed to spin and the edges glowed a faint blue, allowing Naruto to zoom in on the creature inside the jar, like with a camera. The creature was a spider that spanned the same size as a full-grown mon's hand. The tips of its 8 legs and the tips of its fangs were blood red, its bulbous abdomen was black and shivered in anticipation as Naruto looked at it, just as curious, and its trunk was also black. Naruto lightly tapped the jar with his pointer finger before he dropped the jar on the ground. Well, hello there, Spider-san, what species are you? He whispered this to himself as he reached into his baggy hoodie and withdrew a thick tome from the abyss of darkness there. There was a green seal at the sides that simply said species of spiders. He rolled open the tome and was looking up at the spider, then down at the advanced scroll. He had caught the spider in his bed when he was doing spring cleaning and he felt so oddly intrigued by it he didn't kill it. Catching dangerous animals was Naruto's specialty, so it didn't take him more than an hour of chasing it before he bagged it. his inhuman regeneration also helped. It was when he was 3, the only time he ever got a present, when he found the thick scroll on his footsteps. No one ever bothered to check if anything he received was a trap or was even remotely harmful, and he didn't care. He treasured everything he found that was worth money. He had just barely managed to learn how to read by sneaking into the orphanage and attending the classes there among the throngs of fellow 3-year-old. When he had a reasonable grasp on how to read, he dived into the scroll. His first thoughts was wondering why he would find a scroll on spiders in front of his house. The next was if there were more scrolls like that one. Before Naruto had received his black goggles, he had problems with his sight. Or his eyes. Any sharp change in lighting would render him blind for a full minute before they adjusted again. This blindness brought sharp pin-like pain to his pupils and a headache that started from the back of his head and spread to his whole brain. This was mostly because the day the Kyuubi had been sealed into him, Minato had made a small mistake by allowing the flow of demon chakra to reach Naruto's eyes. As the Shinigami prepared to take his soul, he had barely managed to correct his mistake by surrounding Naruto's eyes with level 10 chakra limiters and Jinchuriki restraint seals, which normally would have killed any normal person. The Yondaime had proven his strength in seals that day after he had finished giving Naruto his sight back and also opening a window for medicated glasses to be given to his son, which sadly weren't given to him until his 4th birthday by the unknown person, probably the same person that gave him the scroll on spiders. Before then, Naruto had worn some shades he had picked from a dumpster that weren't too effective against abrupt change in lighting. The black goggles, according to the letter left next to the box that contained the goggles, was fortified by complex fuinjutsu. It allowed him to zoom in, among other things, with a mental command, and carefully regulated the light that entered his eyes, making sure that quick changes wouldn't be noticed that much, but at the same time his vision was still clear. Naruto was immensely grateful to his mysterious helper for his 2 gifts. Here she helped him discover his ambition. Reading the scroll on spiders and also the letter the person had sent with the goggles had made him realize something, that he didn't know up to half of what the person had said. His grammatical handicap had frustrated him to no end. This fact opened his eyes to things he wasn't aware of. Being lower than anyone based on what he knew enraged him greatly, and he never liked the feeling of being mentally inadequate to not knowing the answer to something. He wanted to know everything humanly possible. He had already started his quest for knowledge by visiting the library to expand his vocabulary, staying up well into the night reading because the library was open 24/7 and he exercised that privilege fully. The librarian didn't stop him. Quite frankly, the old Chunin didn't care what he did. All that mattered to him was that his books were placed back in prime condition. Naruto wasn't old enough to get a library card or borrow books. Even though Naruto was still very young, he knew that knowing everything was not possible, so he limited his search of knowledge on living things, organisms and chakra. This also included how the human mind worked. First, he had to start reading basic science textbooks with a dictionary at the ready to search for a word he didn't know the meaning of in a scrapbook where he wrote things down in. Though despite little research, the first living thing he had ever caught, the spider, had interested him the most. There were over 47 documented spider species in Konohagakure alone. This didn't mean that there weren't any more species of spiders to be discovered. Naruto ran his finger over the scroll and instinctively searched for any species of spiders that were red, then ones with red-tipped legs, before he finally found the mysterious spider he caught in his apartment. He sat back a little in shock and tilted his head to the side, trying to make sense of what he had read. He chose to read it again. The sand duster, originally from Sanagakure no Sato. You, my friend, are a long way from home. How did you get here? The scroll says you can't stay 3 hours without the intense heat of the desert. He trailed off when his mind came to a conclusion. Or rather 2, you were either dropped off by my mysterious helper or you were planted. The boy's mouth formed a straight line, a blank expression as he stared at the spider and clenched his teeth. The scroll had said that the spider's venom was merely its saliva stored up for a week. His regeneration fixed any problems the spider had given him, which meant that it was his helper that had planted the spider because the mysterious person somehow knew of his interest in spiders and his vision problems. Naruto ran his fingers through his thin, blonde hair. I am not taking any chances. His limited memory recalled that there was an abandoned warehouse at the far edge of Konoha's forest, barely even touching the walls. People assumed the place was haunted, so most, even the shinobi, stayed clear. Naruto was a rational thinker, as young as he was, so he didn't believe in phantoms or anything that had been the result of irrational thoughts. Naruto's eyes trailed to the spider that was still in the jar, and he furrowed his eyebrows when he noticed it was running around in circles inside its glass prison before realization hit him. It seemed he would have to visit the warehouse sooner than he expected. He stashed his scroll back into his hoodie and ran headlong into the forest. The warehouse he had been thinking about wasn't too far from his normal hiding place. And his theory was proven correct when he stumbled into an open area where his destination lay. The warehouse was a dark, looming structure that towered high into the sky. From Naruto's point of view, with numerous windows that were broken, the morning sun didn't penetrate the section of forest he was in well, so the structure looked like an evil monster that was formed from the very pits of Yomi. Naruto disregarded the old warehouse's large front door and rushed to the side door. He used his shoulders to nudge open the normal-sized door, knowing that the front door was designed to be opened mechanically, and sneezed from all of the dust in the air. His eyes watered and he kept the door open so he could get a grasp of the room he was in. It looked like a sort of office, but it had been stripped down of all its contents. The boy gently dropped the jar and shrugged off his hoodie, showing that he was wearing a black undervest under this, and tightly wrapped it around the spider. The scroll had said that the duster behaved erratically when it was low on heat, so if he released the spider it would run off somewhere and probably die from exertion. The boy looked around and found that the windows were boarded up. They were much too high for him to pull off, and he knew that since the warehouse had been abandoned for so long. Reportedly since the day the Sandaime became Hokage, then there would be nothing to use for a fire there. The boy used the next best thing in his arsenal. He scampered to the spider that had been slowing down and was now behaving sluggishly, and put his hands on the sides of the jar. He closed his eyes and tried to will some of his unnatural regenerative ability out, hopefully in the form of chakra. Kurama stared out of the boy's eyes sadly and shook his head. He would have helped, but his chakra would alert the other shinobi on where Naruto was, and the small child would lose the one place he would ever feel private in. The great beast closed his eyes and sighed when Naruto started crying a little, sobbing out encouragements for his chakra to come out but still wouldn't. "Please," Naruto said, the trails of tears flowing freely from his eyes, and he wheezed a little. "Please, please, please." This was probably the first living thing Naruto had spoken to. This fact was what bolstered Naruto on to coax the chakra out. The spider was now spread eagle on the ground, his glassy eyes looking at Naruto's futile attempt to summon beast chakra. It closed its eyes and never opened them again. No, 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 this can't be happening. For the next half hour Naruto tried to summon chakra to the dead spider, but it was all in vain. The boy lowered his head and rubbed the tears in his eyes out. He then took the jar and made sure the spider was buried respectfully, or as respectfully as a mourning 5-year-old orphan could do without any shovel or even a kunai. Naruto looked down on the fresh grave he dug with his hands, and he clenched them, dirtied and all. His inadequacy and limited mental abilities couldn't perform the simple task of summoning chakra out of his body. A small spurt of rage erupted out of Naruto, and he threw the now empty jar into the dark forest. He heard a resulting smashing sound, telling him that his jar had been broken. Despite basically living in the library for a year and a half and spending more than half of his day reading, he was still not capable of anything to be proud of. The 5-year-old boy rubbed his face and shrugged on his hoodie, and re-entered the abandoned warehouse. As he shouldered through the door leading out to the apparent office of the building, he was met with a sight of every surface in the massive storage space blanketed with a thin layer of dust. He held his right sleeve to his nose and mouth, and the edges of his goggles shone blue, then yellow. This feature in the goggles allowed him to get a general look on his surroundings with only a little dust in the air. The items in the apparent warehouse proved what he had read in the library and the rumors going around in the red light district among the prostitutes. The warehouse he stood in was actually a massive laboratory. The former user had even created a wall to his right where he assumed living people were kept as test subjects. The history of the warehouse was that during the Second Shinobi War, a long while before Hiruzen Sarutobi became the third Hokage, a man that had no records in any country on the continent had arrived under the guise of a businessman who sold cheap but high-quality drugs, antidotes and medicine to Konoha shinobi and civilians alike at the very same place Naruto stood. The Nidaime had been too busy fending off Konoha aggressors to deeply investigate who the man was or why he had come to Konoha with cheap but quality aid, but the wise Hokage had created a faction in the Anbu to watch the man for any suspicious behavior. The drugs the man was supplying weren't creating any adverse effects on anyone as far as he knew, but there was no such thing as free, or in this case cheap, help. though the man wasn't aware that the very Anbu faction he had appointed to investigate the man had been paid off by this very man to look the other way on his proceedings. The man had been kidnapping Konoha citizens and performing sickening tests on them in his own perverse search for the ultimate drug that would provide for him immortality. Super strength and super intelligence, his evil dealings had been successful for 7 years until the Sandaime came was handed the mantle of Hokage. He made the mistake of kidnapping a female Inuzuka clan member. The man had been itching to get his hands on an Inuzuka's brain. To understand the true depths their connection was with their ninkin, and he was very close to but a joint invasion of his laboratory, under the guise of a medicine wholesale warehouse, by the Inuzuka, Nara, Aburame, Hitaki, Hyuga, Uchiha clans and clan-less shinobi had stopped him from digging his fingers further into the poor woman's head. If she had been pulled out of the forced coma she would have been a vegetable for the rest of her life, so they had to perform a mercy killing on her. The man, despite not having any remote shinobi training, had put up a valiant fight by ingesting a drug that allowed him to expel numerous chakra strings from his pores without any complications and repel the invaders, saving his precious lab from the destruction that was to come. He rammed a needle into his chest to increase the flow of adrenaline and another needle went to his neck to give him super strength. Even with all of his perks, if he had even genin-level shinobi coordination he would have lasted longer than a day, but he didn't. The Konoha invaders proved strong enough to take him on. His office had been ransacked of every document he had on his vile experiments and burned. His lab though had been sealed off from the world, it was due to years of deterioration from the building did parts of the initial seal fall off. This was why Naruto had been allowed entry in the first place. Naruto shuffled around and looked closely at the powerful microscopes that had been covered with dust, and then the dirty test tubes and petri dishes that littered the ground haphazardly, probably after their contents had been poured out into sand-filled buckets. Naruto saw a primitive-looking screen that had been destroyed and correctly assumed that it was where the nameless man had made his video recordings. From the age of the screen the pictures it would produce would be grainy and lack any color besides black and white. Why bother using it in the first place? The boy ignored the screen and gently ran his fingers over an arm-length open jar that lay on its side. He saw a faint break in the dust on the ground with his now faint yellow-tinted goggles, like the person, or thing, in the jar had tried to escape but had died from overexposure to the elements. It might have happened during the day-long fight between the man and the Konoha shinobi. His theory was proven right when he saw a small pile of bones where the faint tracks led. He wouldn't have even caught the track if it weren't for his goggles. He knelt down beside the bones and screwed his lips to the side at how they were. They didn't even look remotely human. The bones looked like a cross between a rat and fish, but as big as a 3-year-old. Naruto picked up a bone and noticed something on the floorboard directly under the pile of bones. A small chink in the wood that was raised up fractionally like the creature had tried to pry it open with its teeth. He slowly removed the hooked teeth from the wooden floorboard and poked his finger through the hole. He felt a slightly cool draft there but not much of a temperature change from the entire building. Naruto ran through all his goggles could do. Blue for zooming in, yellow for a general view on what something was supposed to look like. It usually delayed depending on how complex the thing was. Green for chakra levels, red for chakra network and orange for night vision. His secret helper had said that if he grew old it could do much more for him and him alone, but again his age and current mental abilities was a frustrating handicap. Naruto assumed that if he mastered his goggles enough he would be able to unlock or even add X-ray vision to what it could do, but at the moment he would have to see through surfaces the manual way. Naruto grabbed the bone he guessed was the femur and hacked down on the floorboard. He grunted with each downward smash, and when he noticed that he was breaking through the old wooden floor he began bashing the floor harder. More insistent until it broke clean through. He exhaled the breath he was holding and pulled the bone out of the floor, dropping it near him, and he pulled his sleeves to his palms. He used them as sort of makeshift hand protectors. He used his makeshift hand protectors to grab the broken wooden floor and heaved. He heard a small crack and he puffed out another breath before he heaved back one final time. He threw away the wood and painstakingly pulled out 3 more boards so he could see clearer. When he was done he found a dust-coated white lab briefcase. He reached in and hefted it out, shocked by how heavy it was, and lugged it backwards, away from the hole in the ground in case it caved in. When he was in a safe distance he blew the dust off the case and saw the name Ashitori Orochimaru neatly placed on the top. Naruto's goggles turned green, showing that he was checking for any sort of chakra seal, and sighed when there wasn't any. He flipped the latch on the briefcase and carefully opened it. His eyebrows shot into his hairline at the things inside. There was a voice recorder tucked neatly to the side, thick notes with neat handwriting inside, something he assumed were memory cards for the voice recorder that were organized by topic and time in pockets at the left side of the case. There was an assortment of pens at the right side that were neatly tucked according to color, and finally there was a picture of a grinning man on the lid. The man had pitch black hair and was extremely pale. He had on clear, thick glasses under which he had black pupils. His mouth was stretched into a toothy grin, exposing his needle-like canines, and with his sharp chin, nose and posture would have made Naruto think he was a vampire. He was standing beside a door that was labeled X19 and was giving the camera a happy thumb up. From the small door-sized window on the door he saw a small shadow cross. He couldn't see it clearly, but the person looked much younger than him. He was fully donned in generic doctor's uniform with 3 pens neatly placed in his right breast pocket and a clipboard in his left hand. At the foot of the picture was again that curious name Ashitori Orochimaru, but this time under that name was the title Doc Roshi. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows at the picture. It was now obvious that the name of this vile and evil man that had performed vile and evil experiments on humans was Ashitori Orochimaru, and that was when something clicked in Naruto's mind. The rat-fish hybrid was what Ashitori had been observing before the invasion, and it had dropped when the doctor had unleashed his chakra strings. As Ashitori ran out to face the shinobi fearlessly, the creature, probably tormented from the brain-numbing experiments, tried to expose where the evil doctor had kept his backup research material which, like a good doctor, he had in case he was ever to lose his life's work. The creature had died before it could muster up the strength to use its hook-like rat teeth to rip up the floor. Maybe from being in the open air for too long, it was trying to show the shinobi where the last of Ashitori's work was so it could also be destroyed. Rather than that happening, its dead body had been avoided like the plague, probably because it had already started to fester and give off a rancid stench. It was not meant for open air. The evil doctor's life's work had survived and apparently was now in Naruto's hands. Quite frankly, the fact he was able to piece that all together surprised even him. A twisted smirk slowly crawled on Naruto's face as he skimmed through the notes, ignoring the parts that were well past his mental ability. He couldn't help himself. A laugh of childish glee escaped his lips. His laughter echoed around the empty laboratory and into the darkness of the woods around. Time skip. 7 years later. Congratulations to all of our new genin, and I wish you all the best in your fields of specialization. The team selection list will be posted in a week, so be back by then. Know that I am proud of all of you. I see great things in your futures. Dismissed. Iruka finished and the excited genin began chattering amongst themselves as they left the class. He smiled at them and sat down on his desk to organize some homework he had given another class. He looked up 5 minutes later when the noise had subsided and just barely caught Naruto before he slipped out of the class, his hitate tied to his left arm and his black hoodie throwing a shadow over his face and part of his nose ominously. Iruka raised his hand to get the boy's attention. "Hey Naruto." Naruto stopped his quiet walk and tilted his head to the side. "Sensei," he answered shortly. "You did great in your weapons test. Who taught you how to use the senbon?" "I must have picked it up somewhere." Naruto shrugged and fully turned to Iruka. "Your taijutsu spar with Mizuki was also spectacular. I mean, where did you get that style from?" The spar had been stopped just before Naruto could jam his fingers into Mizuki's neck. "Made it myself. I couldn't find a style good for me, so I made my own." "Have you named it yet?" "Yes, I call it the four-legged spider style. It's still a work in progress. In actuality it was called the shadow-legged spider fighting style, but it had stages. With each increase in effort he would add a leg if he wanted, both figuratively and physically speaking. Though he was limited to only 4 legs, he was confident he would be able to figure out how to get 5 or even more legs without being deformed. "Speaking of work in progress, who taught you the shadow clone technique?" "Do you really want to know?" Naruto said with mild amusement lacing his words. The academy teacher perked up. "Yes, I won it in a poker game with some drug dealers' bodyguards." Naruto snorted out a laugh when Iruka went pale. "They're just big softies, sensei. They took their loss like real men." Iruka didn't ask him how old he was when he won the A-rank jutsu, and he didn't feel like telling. "I am just glad to hear you're not harmed." Naruto nodded and sent a lax 2-finger salute to his former teacher. "I have to go now. There are issues I must attend to." He walked out before Iruka could respond, and the light smile that was on his face was wiped off in favor of an amused smirk. There was a lot going for Naruto at the moment. He had managed to decipher the notes Ashitori had written and was now sure that his knowledge of the human body was only matched by a medical doctor in the hospital. It had taken him a few months of manual labor, but he had gotten the laboratory and the office clean for inhabitation. The tools he used to clean he had stolen from the cleaning supplies storage room in the hospital. It was kind of sad how low on importance the hospital was. The security there was appalling. The money he had been using for upkeep, which was supposed to come from the Sandame but still hadn't, was gotten from gambling in the red light district, posing as a millionaire that lusted for money as much as he liked winning. Naruto walked away from the academy with his hands in his red ninja pants pockets. His head was down and his eyes furrowed in thought. Running through various things in his mind that primarily concerned expanding his knowledge on living creatures. He hadn't yet started actively testing on humans in his laboratory, but he reserved a section in the warehouse where he stored wild animals for experiments there. Though he had been slipping small doses of drugs he had crafted in his laboratory into other students' food, jotting down their reactions. This was after he had extensively tested the drug on himself. There was no drug newly that he didn't test on himself except a few select drugs that would be very detrimental to his mental capacities. One of his minor goals was to harness the animal's power and successfully place it in a human. He deduced he could do this with Fuinjutsu, but with how busy he always was he couldn't find the time to rise past level 6. He was so lost in thought he didn't react in time for a neck grab. The culprit viciously pulled him back into an academy training ground he was passing through. The budding scientist used the momentum of this move to roll backwards twice, and when his eyes were forward again he leveled both of his arms at the person. Glinting silver senbon launchers twinkled a little under his hoodie's sleeves. Sunlight hit the tip of the senbon that was ready to be fired. Sasuke looked at him with a deep frown that deepened when Naruto snorted and stood upright, making sure to push his senbon back into their inbuilt containers with his pointer finger. "Oh, it's just you," Naruto said with a downward twitch of his lips, but he covered this up perfectly and smirked at the Uchiha. "I want a rematch," Uzumaki Sasuke shortly said. "Excuse me." "You heard me, I want a rematch," Sasuke snarled and got into a strong Uchiha taijutsu stance. "No, I didn't give you a choice." The Uchiha darted at Naruto and Naruto leaned away from a punch. He stepped away rigidly when a kick was sent at him and bent under a savage right hook. "Fight me, damn it." "I am pretty sure I said no." The blonde boy slipped away from a grasp for his head, stepped away from the rising knee and quickly got close to Sasuke. When he got back to the ground, he swept his feet from under the Uchiha, and as the boy was going down he had a blow to his stomach follow after. Sasuke grunted as the punch hit him as his back hit the ground. "That's enough, Sasuke-san." "Fight me, Dobi," Sasuke growled. "If this is your Uchiha pride speaking, I advise you to discard it. I am not in the mood to be trifled with." Naruto stood up and dusted down his hoodie. When he noticed that Sasuke was gearing his muscles up to leap at him, he leveled his right fist at his face. A senbon clicked into place on the launcher. "I am warning you, Sasuke-san. I am not above killing anyone." The Uchiha snarled and his fingers twitched anxiously. "You don't have the guts, Dobi. Do you want to test me? Go on, attack me. I dare you." When Sasuke hesitated he stepped back. "That's what I thought." He spun around on his heels and marched out of the training ground. "Meet me when you're calmer, Sasuke-san. You'd pose a bigger challenge then," Naruto said over his shoulder. As he exited the training ground he stopped and turned to the person he sensed had been following him from the academy. Besides Sasuke, the person, Mizuki Toji, hurried up to him and grinned. "Friend Lily." "Hey there, kid, Mizuki-sensei. How may I help you?" Both began walking to Naruto's apartment. "I saw how you took down Sasuke. I was merely telling him to back off." Naruto stopped abruptly, and so did his former teacher. "Either way it was very impressive." Naruto just shrugged. "I was just looking for the best student I ever taught." Naruto, who had continued walking, stopped again and looked at Mizuki suspiciously. "Mind I ask why?" He crossed his arms and looked at his sensei. "There was some extra credit stuff only the best of the best can do, and you, Naruto, are the best of the best." Naruto scratched chin and raised an eyebrow. "You're trying to stoke my ego, why?" Mizuki scratched his cheek bashfully and winked at the younger boy. "You got me, you're so smart." Naruto rolled his eyes and kept walking. He passed the invisible boundary into the red light district, and immediately he did so he grabbed a ruffian by the scruff of his neck. The child was basically wearing gray rags and his dirty brown hair speckled dirt on Naruto's hand. The blond boy mutely stared at the street rat before he slowly brought his hand forward and motioned for the boy to drop what he had taken. The boy smiled bashfully and dropped the brown wallet that was stuffed with crisp money notes. Naruto shook his head and motioned for more. The boy looked at him pleadingly, making sure to enlarge his pupils in a perfect rendition of the kicked puppy look, but Naruto raised an amused eyebrow and the boy huffed, crossing his arms for a few seconds before he emptied his pockets into Naruto's hand. The blond boy dropped the street rat and sharply nodded for the boy to scram. He gave the stolen items to the dumbfounded shinobi next to him. "How did he get my wallet?" Mizuki quietly asked. "You should be asking how he got your wristwatch, your kunai pouch and the Icha paradise that was in your back pocket," Naruto idly answered. "You really should be more aware, sensei." "Can I assume you know how to pickpocket too?" "I know a lot of things," the boy responded with a small shrug. "Now, what crime were you trying to get me to commit?" Mizuki playfully punched Naruto's shoulder and grinned, making Naruto glare death at the man. The silent warning already said. Mizuki scratched the back of his head. "I like that about you, Naruto-kun, you're straightforward." "You haven't yet answered my question. Can we go somewhere private first? I think we're being watched." Naruto began to wonder at this. They were now directly in front of his apartment, but he didn't trust Mizuki to let him in. The man wanted him to commit a crime, for crying out loud. Naruto's goggles glowed a faint red and he looked around. The chakra signatures he found were only civilians staying inside their apartments, no one else. "There's no one listening in, I'll take your word for it. I want you to steal something from me. The forbidden scroll where all the village's high-ranked jutsu are kept. I know of the value, but what's in it for me? Matter of fact, why can't you steal it yourself? What if I tell you that I will pay you 70% of the money I will get after I sell the scroll?" "How much is 70%? "About 500 million ryo in cash." Okay. Who's to say I won't rat you out to the Hokage?" "We both know you won't do that." "Oh?" Naruto asked. "You're gathering money and resources for something I don't know." "You've also been stalking me, sensei." It was a good thing Naruto was a censor type. He made sure to emphasize the also. The village's shinobi had been stalking him since he had started in the academy, but by that time he already had a blood-locking seal placed inside his apartment door. No one was breaking in unless they blew the whole building up somehow. "Will you help me or not? Think about it. All that money will go a long way for you no matter what you use it for." "Alright. When should I get the scroll?" "My buyer wants it tonight. You can even be there during the transaction. I assure you he's legit." Naruto slowly nodded and shook his former sensei's hand. "See you this night then, let's say. The forest at the east side of the village." "Perfect." Mizuki grinned gleefully and waved over his shoulder to the boy. "Midnight, don't be late." Naruto didn't bother to give him a response. He was busy creating assumptions on why Mizuki was so insistent it was him that got the forbidden scroll. Maybe it was because he thought Naruto would get caught, and when Naruto would accuse him, the older shinobi would have the superiority card. Maybe Mizuki thought that the traps would kill him. Maybe Mizuki wanted to kill him so he could have all of the money himself. Or maybe Mizuki just wanted to kill him in some sort of elaborate scheme. He didn't really care. Stealing the forbidden scroll would be the ultimate test for his skills in stealth. And if things went south, he could always fall back on his innocence mask. His innocence mask was a facade he created that had unfailingly gotten him out of suspicion during the days academy children had been disappearing for 4 hours and reappearing with no knowledge of what had transpired within that time. Naruto, though, was never present when the disappearings were happening, so naturally people would initially become suspicious, but they were cleared of it after they had tracked Naruto to a library. Naruto knew that his innocent facade wouldn't be enough to set him free from any criminal charges he would get if he was caught, so he pondered on another way to go about it. He walked through the house in deep thought and instinctively went to his bathroom. He closed the door and set a locking seal in place. A solid creation that required his blood to unlock. He went to the bathroom mirror and placed his palm on the surface. He suspected the silent alarm seal at his destination was ringing, and he counted to 5 before he channeled chakra. Just as a shadow clone in his warehouse placed his own palm on the wall of his office. A complex seal spiraled into view on the surfaces and a burst of chakra smoke covered them. Naruto looked around and saw that he was in his modesty-furnished office situated in the abandoned warehouse, while the clone was back in his apartment bathroom. The body switch seal was not as advanced as most thought. It was a level 5 seal with unknown origins that was an alternative for the basic body switch ninjutsu, but it was used for far distances. The boy pulled off his now well-fitted hoodie and hung it on a coat rack in favor of putting on a doctor's lab coat. He looked around his office. Decorated with soothing blue paint on the walls and a solid oak desk with smooth edges. His chair was soft and comfortable, but not too soft. There were stacks and stacks of books neatly placed on bookshelves in the wall on opposite sides of the room, and behind Naruto's desk were organized racks. He kept spare lab instruments in case the one in the lab warehouse break. They were held in a thick, see-through glass container that was protected by a padlock and a blood seal. The boy smoothly walked out of his office, his calf-length white lab coat swishing with him as he entered the containment room. He kept his test animals. During Ashidara's time in using the lab, he had created a makeshift wall where he received buyers of his drugs while a single door led them to his laboratory. Naruto had torn down that division and expanded the lab even more. He curtly walked through a room where caged animals were kept. Not even flinching when a giant tiger leapt at him but bounced off the reinforced steel bars that contained it. He exited the room and grabbed the clipboard hooked to the wall near the door. He idly twirled his pen and read through what the clipboard said. His eyes flicked up at the few clones scurrying around his lab and performing general maintenance before his eyes flicked to the far end of the lab where a ceiling-high glass container stood proudly. The boy smiled lightly and walked to it. Inside the large glass container was what could be considered a slice of the forest. There were a few shrubs, trees and plants there. He whistled and a light skittering sound met his ears before a monstrous-sized spider pushed out of the ground from a hidden burrow. The spider had a blue with red harshly designed abdomen that had the white kanji for queen spider on top. Each letter was speckled with complex seals that combined to form the words. Its legs the same height as Naruto and its trunk was black. Its 8 red eyes blinked at Naruto and a single black leg delicately touched the glass container. Naruto smiled at the spider and tapped the glass barrier with his pen. "How are you feeling today, Queen?" The spider seemed to roll her leg and experimentally tested all of her legs. "I feel great, Naruto-sama," it hissed. Naruto jotted down its reply. "My clones say you haven't been resisting your shots. You will be rewarded." Naruto snapped his fingers and a clone walked forward and slipped a small scroll through a one-way opening. A quick burst of chakra to the scroll and 2 dead cows popped out. The spider wasted no time to tear its arm-length red fangs into the fat creatures and injected a corroding venom into them. "Your bone growth and development charts are very impressive, Queen. You can now hit a tree without injuring yourself." The spider kept quiet as it kept on sucking the dead cows like drinks, still raptly paying attention to what Naruto was saying. "The nature chakra summoning seals haven't been affecting you because you are an animal." He flipped a page on the clipboard. "It has fully integrated itself into your bones and your organs. Now you have an official chakra network. Congratulations." "Thank you, Naruto-sama." The spider bowed subserviently. "I wouldn't have it if it wasn't for you." Naruto waved the praise away. "Your charts tell me that you have already laid eggs, a lot of eggs in your cave." "Oh yes," the spider hissed. "The sperm came from some spider donors your clones had gathered. I estimate they would hatch in 3 weeks. They're your first children and I am sure they're still getting used to having nature chakra and my chakra in them." Naruto had taken his interest in spiders to a whole new level when he had read about Hitaki Kakashi. The copy ninja had personally raised his summons and had used his limited experience in Fuinjutsu to create a summoning realm for the dogs. Which wasn't exactly a pocket dimension like most believed, but more of an expanse of land Kakashi bought and sealed into a complex storage seal only he could activate. This was super simplified version of what Kakashi really did. Naruto, after relentless digging and smuggling, had found out that there wasn't a spider clan anywhere, so he added creating a spider clan to his many goals in life. The first thing he did was crossbreed a common house spider with a desert duster. Then he had crossbred the offsprings with another species of spider. The survivors would crossbreed with more spiders Naruto smuggled in from all over the elemental nations until only 3 multiple breed spiders remained. The idea of crossbreeding a creature with so many of its kind would seem impossible if Naruto had not been well known to defy the impossible on a daily basis. Naruto picked the strongest multiple breed of spiders and harvested the sperm from the other. This was where his work got harder. He took a single drop of spider semen and was pushing small pulses of chakra into it for a full year until the semen turned a soft blue. He then took the eggs from the strongest, and still living female, which in on itself was a difficult feat since that female was now twice his size and very carnivorous, and began to gently push Kyuubi chakra into a single drop. This was done through an airtight reinforced seal to prevent anyone detecting it. The first attempt was a horrible failure with the drop evaporating on contact with the vile chakra, but Naruto had proved his Uzumaki persistence by administering growth hormones to the strongest spider. He kept a close eye on the development and again harvested the eggs. This time there was a small delay before the egg samples exploded. The blonde boy administered custom-made blood builders that was specifically created for spiders, bone-thickening drugs and muscle growth hormones to the female spider. The result was that the spider got even bigger, more intimidating, and more uncontrollable, so much so that Naruto had to move her container outside the lab in case she ever broke out. The drugs he had given were a good idea, but on contact with the demon chakra it delayed half a day before it exploded. The boy then took some brain fluid from the feral female spider and injected it into a lone egg. The result was the egg taking the fluid completely and reinforcing its biological makeup. This time the Kyuubi chakra was willingly taken for half a year. Naruto then combined the eggs and the sperms and carefully recorded everything that was happening for yet another year. When the eggs hatched, there were 36 baby spiders that peered up at him inquisitively, not showing the maniacal traits of their mother. From there it was a survival of the fittest for the spiders until only Queen remained the top of the food chain. The first spider he had gotten eggs from had entered a whole new stage of feral. Naruto had no option but to sedate her for an unknown period of time. His studies with nature chakra had told him that animals exposed to huge amount of the chakra would turn docile and calm, as seen even more when he had applied the seal on Queen Spider. The Queen had said that she was now able to think clearly. All the individual minds of the spider species inside her had now merged and were speaking in one voice. Her voice. Naruto had applied a nature chakra summoning seal onto the massive sleeping first spider, and the result, after about 3 months of continuous exposure, was its black hair and skin turning gray and its size reducing to about Naruto's height when he was 9. He had already pulled the spider out of her forced coma and, much to Naruto's surprise, the spider had taken up clothmaking, soothing, calm, quality clothmaking. The spider had also been attending the classes her daughter took to learn how to speak, extending it even further by learning how to write. He called the gray, elderly-looking spider Sagi. It was her clothes Naruto now used for clothes. Sagi could basically make anything he asked for as long as it was a form of clothing. Naruto turned to his right and waved to Sagi. The elderly spider was sitting in her own glass container, surrounded by a similar-looking forest habitat. Sagi beamed at him, her serrated teeth hidden behind her pincer fangs gleaming happily. She was in the middle of meditating while she balanced on one needle-like protrusion from the ground with all 6 of her legs, while 2 legs touched each other at the tips. She had said that she had read about summoning elders and was now perfecting her control so she would fit the position of summoning elders. Sagi didn't have Naruto or Kyuubi's chakra in her, just pure nature chakra, and that chakra quickly incorporated into her system. This meant that she was the only one that would be able to perfectly perform Sage Mode among any spider that she gave birth to. Naruto supported her in her ambition by supplying her with history books on the elemental nations and on clan summons. Sagi waved back with one of her legs and went back to her mediation. Another thing the older spider was working on was creating spider clan-based jutsu. So far it was coming along well enough. The Nature Chakra Summoning Seal was a level 5S rank seal Naruto made use of carefully on the surviving spider. It was just a stroke of luck that the seal just so happened to not negatively affect animals. The eager-to-please physical manifestation of Naruto's determination. Queen Spider had taken all the tests Naruto had given gladly and was now able to grow as large as the Hokage Tower if she found the strength to. As grueling and borderline cruel as Naruto's tests were, she didn't complain or hesitate. She had learned quickly that she was merely a tool to reach ambition, and she honestly didn't mind. Naruto hadn't willingly abused her, and she would literally not be alive if he wasn't there. The added power that flowed through her body peacefully felt great, and she knew that Naruto had the power to take it from her. She could never bring herself to harm Naruto, physically or emotionally. Naruto had encountered the Kyuubi when he had tested a painkiller on himself. A drug that turned out to be a weed killer. The boy blamed it on the fact that he was 6 years old and still very naive when it came to science. He was sick for a whole week and the great beast had used the reduced mental protection to pull Naruto into the mindscape for a chat. Kyuubi had told Naruto that he didn't really care what Naruto did, all in the name of his life's ambition, as long as he didn't die. Naruto acknowledged that there was a lot he could learn from Kyuubi, and Kyuubi saw Naruto a little competent for a child, so it was inevitable that they would enter a mutual benefit alliance. Naruto had access to Kyuubi's chakra and could ask for help whenever he needed it, while Kyuubi had extended his senses from Naruto, so it included hearing and even to an extent feeling. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki was now instructing the massive Spider Queen to perform different motions and actions. He ordered Queen to balance on a single leg while the remaining 7 legs stretched and touched over her, then to spin a web as quickly as possible. He estimated that the strength of a single web was that of the solid steel support pillars holding up the corners of the cage's tower, not yet up to the main support pillar but a close second, while at the same time it remained as flexible as a rubber band. Queen was able to fire these webs from her abdomen, 8 legs or her mouth. Naruto had been researching on how he could harness this ability into himself. The most he could come up with was taking the chemicals that created the webs from Queen's abdomen and soaking ninja wire in them. This allowed the wire to recreate this ability, but to a much lesser extent. He kept the long roll of special ninja wire in a compartment in his Senbon launchers for when he would need them. Creating a summoning realm from scratch wasn't going to be easy, far from it actually. A standard animal summoning seal consisted of many complex seals. A notable one was called the Infinity Seal, which meant that the summoning realm wasn't in some sort of astral realm, rather it was in an overpowered storage dimension where the very air was raw with natural chakra and energy. It was inhabitable for human, but animals thrived in the natural atmosphere. All Infinity Seals were connected to each other, whether they were made since the dawn of shinobi history or even recently like Hitaki Kakashi. So it was possible for one summons to visit the other in the summoning dimension, or as it is popularly called, summoning realm. Infinity Seals though required blood sacrifice, which was why scrolls were presented by the animal summons for the person to sign his name in blood. The signature itself was very useless, but the blood was the chief requirement. The dramatics of the signature was just a formality. Hand seals followed the summoning seal, especially when a blood sacrifice was given. Information about the animal summoning seal was not secret because the village found out that virtually no one was interested in studying far into Fuinjutsu, so the information was more for show rather than application. Hand seals had taken the place of the Fuinjutsu for animal summons. Naruto prided himself on being a very good researcher, or even an investigator, so how to create an animal summoning seal for new animal summons almost from scratch was given to in his level 4 training scroll for Fuinjutsu, and also from catching a long glimpse of Kakashi's own summoning scroll after he had won a game of cards. The process was painstaking. First, the animals he wanted to summon had to be ready and willing to perform the necessary requirements. Then he would have to draw the extremely complex animal summoning seal on a very thick sheet of paper and have to constantly supply chakra into it to keep it fresh. Then he would have to find an expanse of land that he was absolutely sure would accommodate his summons. This stage was usually done by exploring elemental nations for a terrain that his summons would thrive in. After the terrain had been found, he had been recommended to purchase the land because the process of scanning, copying and replicating the land into the Infinity Seal usually took 3 days despite constant supply of chakra. This was because the detail in the newly purchased land had to be perfect and flawless, if not the new summoning clan would break apart. He would know that the process was done when the seal abruptly stopped pulsing out chakra through the ground and through the air. Then he would have to carefully tore the animals into the scroll. Immediately after entering the expanse of land would register the life force of the creature, and that was that. If Naruto wanted, he could entrust the animal summoning scroll to a summons for safekeeping, or he could keep it himself, his choice. This process was also regarding the fact that the summoning clan he wanted to create didn't already exist. If not, the Infinity Seal in the summoning seal would suck him in as well and assimilate him with the rest of the realm, which was usually by turning him into the animal summons he wanted to create a clan for. Then a few hours later he would turn to stone. Naruto though was 100% sure that there was no such thing as the spider summoning clan. His plan was that a week before the eggs were to hatch he would have already found a place to scan. The blonde boy sighed deeply and ran his fingers through his hair. Raising a 400-pound spider queen was like raising a horse. A very smart, verbally articulate, 8-legged horse. He had educated her on how to read and had helped give her ideas on abilities she could perform with her new nature chakra network. Though he left the bulk for her since it was all up to her on how to use the nature chakra, he reached in through the small window where he could feed Queen and pet her head. The female spider hissed in approval and lowered her head in subservience. He pulled his arm out and turned around, walking to a desk where a powerful microscope stood proudly, gleaming in the bright fluorescent lights in the lab. The clone there shifted out of his way and he looked into the eyepiece. There was a small, flat circular container under the microscope and inside were 2 blood samples that had been divided by a solid glass panel. He looked over his shoulder and said, "Have you started the tests?" The clone shook his head. "No, boss, I was just about to start." "Don't mind if I do then," Naruto said and turned a knob on the microscope so he could peer closer at the 2 blood samples. One was gotten from him and the other was from Queen. He handed his clipboard to the clone behind him and pointed at a new state-of-the-art screen. "Keep watch, tell me if you notice something abnormal." On the screen was the same thing he was examining with his microscope. He carefully used his index finger to push the glass panel out of the way and the blood flowed together. The deep red and deep green blood mingled. He adjusted a knob and watched in fascination as his red blood cell merged with Queen's. "First test seems to be going well." The clone wrote down what his boss had said. "No complications so far. Maybe because her blood contains some properties from mine." He furrowed his eyebrows and closed his left eye, still hidden behind his goggles, and gently turned another knob. "Boss, my white blood cells are killing hers. How is that even possible?" "Maybe because of the Kyuubi?" The clone suggested and scribbled something down. "Probably." The blood samples now looked like they were at war with each other. The red blood cells had merged, one to another, but the white blood cells were eating Queen's, though the platelets merely brushed past each other and their general color rippled to blue before both turned red with the blood. The blood war continued for 3 minutes until only a single one of his white blood cells remained. His cell was still dissolving and absorbing Queen's when the budding scientist was about to call the experiment a failure until Lone Defender cell divided into 2 identical-looking cells. The cells continued subdividing until they were more than enough. Some died and they were quickly replaced by another. Naruto bit his bottom lip to contain the happily laugh, but he did pump his fist in the air. "First test is successful." The clone wrote this down. "We leave it for a week, keeping up constant inspections, before we move to the second test." "Hi, boss." Naruto had been testing the prospect of injecting himself with advanced spider blood gotten straight from Queen. The test was an initial success, but it told him that if he was to eventually inject himself he had better be ready to be in a world of pain and fluctuating sickness. He only hoped his status as a Jinchuriki would prove itself even more. This was probably because Queen contained over 500 species of spider gathered from all over the elemental nations and brought to Naruto through shady dealings and smuggling. Naruto pumped his fist in the air again before he felt a small tingle on his shoulder from the silent alarm connected to the body switch seal. Half a second later he felt a clone tap his shoulder and presented a medium-sized scroll to him. "Someone slipped this into my pocket, boss." Naruto's eyebrows shot into his hairline. He wasn't scheduled to receive any secret message this month. Who could it be? He murmured. He unrolled the scroll and read. "Dearest Naruto-kun, how's my little scientist doing? I know I've not been the best godmother to you and from the bottom of my heart I am very sorry. I am currently not in Konoha right now. The only way I have been able to send my first 3 gifts to you was through a spy I had from Waterfall that left the gifts for you on your doorstep. Despite this I know you Naruto-kun, and even though I may be a little too late I love you with all my heart. My picture of you may be a little outdated, it's one of you when you just started in the academy. I think you were 8. Speaking of the academy, I know as a fact you inherited Minato-kun's genius. I knew your father, he was the best thing that happened to me, believe it or not. Though I am not his blood sister I might as well be. Minato liked spiders too, you know. He was absolutely fascinated with them, but he was always too busy learning seals with Jiraiya or hanging out with Kushina, your mother. He was a sweet guy. He never liked to disappoint, sort of like you. I have planted some suggestions in Mizuki Toji's head about you. If I am correct, which I usually am, he wants you to steal the Forbidden Scroll so you too can sell it to a mysterious buyer." "Yeah, no, it's a trap. He wants to kill you. I pushed him in your direction because I have a gut feeling that you have reached a snag in your research. Consider him my 4th present to you. Don't hold back. He has a defective cursed seal of heaven on him. I am sure you will trounce him either way. He will probably be fueled by anger and vengeance, so don't let anything he says get to you. I am sure you are Minato's son, so nothing will get to you. You're a shinobi now, I hear, so that means you can handle money on your own. I have sealed 500 million Ryu into this letter. Don't worry, I have many secret accounts in several hidden villages. I merely retrieved 10 million from each of them. The banks are usually used by rich people, so withdrawing that high amount of money won't raise any eyebrows. Money is no object to me, Naruto-kun. And for you I can shower all the riches in the world if it's to get you to your goal. When we meet we can talk more, I promise. Consider the money your fifth gift. I also want to tell you that whatever path you choose I will be behind you all the way. With love, Orochimaru of the Sannin, Snake Sage, P.S. Here's a jutsu that will help you break into the Hokage's tower. I learned it in Iwagakure. It's called the Chameleon Skin Tone Jutsu. It should NT be too hard if you use shadow clones to learn it. It's C rank, so it should NT be too hard. Naruto scanned the letter for any sort of illusion or any chakra fingerprints before he furrowed his eyebrows in thought. He now apparently had a missing ninja Sannin as a godmother. He sniffed slightly and caught the hinted scent of blood, snakes and roses. The blood slightly overpowered the rest of the scents, but he still caught them clearly. It actually made sense that Orochimaru was his godmother. He resembled the Yondaime so much, and since the fourth was a high official he would have to have someone high up there as well. He wondered who his godfather was though. The man wasn't even making an effort to contact him. At least he could sympathize with Orochimaru. She was a missing ninja and a highly ranked one at that. The snake woman wouldn't be able to visit him personally. He gently rolled up the scroll and tucked it into his pants pocket. He would cherish the letter till the end, even if he didn't show it. He looked around and noticed that his clones were staring at him. What? Get back to work, he barked and marched to the massive main door of the lab while his shadow clones went back to attending to his many experiments. He grabbed a mechanical crank on a door and pulled backwards. The doors lifted up like a garage door, allowing fresh air to rustle through the lab. About 50 paces before him and around the lab was the pitch-black forest where the sounds of nightlife came from. He took in a deep breath and walked out, not afraid that the air he was letting in could contaminate his work or even of how dark the forest around him was. It looked to be about an hour after sunset, so that gave him about 5 hours to prepare for his mission. As he walked he held up a single ram hand seal and a clone popped into life beside him. He gave his white coat to the clone, showing that he was wearing a plain black undervest. He tinkered with his senbon launchers before he summoned another clone. Learn that jutsu and make more clones to practice it. I need to get it right this night. Then to his sparring partner clone he said, "Don't hold back." The copy of Naruto nodded curtly and both darted at each other. Oh! An orange glow flashed from a corner far from the cage's tower before it disappeared. As if it hadn't happened in the first place, a slight protrusion rose from the shadow cast by a 2-story residential building and darted out. Under the soft glow of the moon it looked like a black blob. The person rubbed his black glove-covered hands and leapt onto the side of a building as his senses warned him of a chunin running rounds through the street. The person was probably not a censor, if not he would have been forced to knock him out. As the oblivious shinobi passed by he skittered across the wall and flipped dexterously onto the roof. The small light that shone down on him showed that the person wore a long-sleeved black shirt and black calf-length shinobi pants. His fingers were covered in black gloves and his feet was also in black sandals. Ones that barely made a sound when it touched the ground. Over his head was a full-head ski mask, hiding his blonde hair, with a fox anbu mask attached to the face. His black goggles still under the mask like it wasn't there in the first place. On his wrists close to his elbow were his silver senbon launchers, though they were covered under smooth black metal, leaving only the launching points to poke out of the top. He also had a small black backpack on his back that held any equipment he needed in emergencies. Naruto adjusted his mask, briefly looked up and again seemed to melt into the shadow cast by the ledge of the building. Light footfalls padded as he ran at mid-chunin speed, opting for stealth than speed. Before he reached the very edge of the cage's tower, he flipped through a few hand seals, chameleon skin tone jutsu. His body rippled and he was out of sight, or more like he blended in with the surface of the tower. Even if the moonlight hit him it would still seem like he wasn't there in the first place. The boy whipped out 2 senbon from his pants pockets and jammed them into the sides of the building. He used the senbon to launch himself high into the air and gently placed his feet on the building. His chakra keeping him in place, he made a slightly violent yanking motion with his hands and the senbon were pulled out and went back to Naruto's hands. He placed the back into his pockets, Unafraid if they pricked him, and he skittered over the side of the building eerily like a spider, his hidden goggles adjusted perfectly in the darkness as he peered into the highest window in the tower, correctly assuming that that would be where the forbidden scroll was kept. He kept track of the guard rotation and noticed that there were silent alarm seals on the windows. He quietly pulled out a finger-sized scroll from his pocket, and just as the lone Anbu operative marched downstairs, he unrolled the scroll and placed it on the window. A barely perceptible blue flash occurred that Naruto hid under him, still in his chameleon jutsu, so no one noticed, not even the tiny chakra burst. 60 seconds, he mentally said, and he slipped a senbon out of his sleeve. Soaked in blue unknown substance, and created a clean circle on the glass window. He flipped through and hastily grabbed the falling circle of glass into his safe grip. Hanging onto the wall through surface walking, he placed the circle back in place and the glass went back to how it originally was. Unblemished, the seal he had used on the window was to freeze every other seal within the room and on the window for a minute. So no silent alarm was pulsed to the Hokage. As he mutely touched down on the floor, he crouched down and studied the scroll's location, placed on a pedestal in the middle of the room. He leveled his right fist at the scroll and took careful aim before he fired a senbon, connected to a semi-invisible piece of ninja wire. The ninja needle jammed onto the top corner of the scroll and Naruto reeled it in, catching the scroll as it came at him. He exited the same way he came and with the same special senbon just as all the alarm seals came back online. He dropped from the building and shot a senbon connected to ninja wire to the roof to slow down his drop. He pulled back his weapons and ran quickly to where he was to drop off the scroll with Mizuki. He skidded to a stop when he saw a ninkin running as fast as it could in the general direction of the Sarutobi residence. He accurately fired barrage after barrage of knockout poison senbon from his launcher, but the swift canine dodged most of them, besides the 6 needles that stabbed its calves and hits side, and disappeared into the night. Naruto shook his head silently. The dog had be as strong as an ox to not be knocked out immediately. He too disappeared into the night, making sure not to use surface walking so the ninja wouldn't track him easily. The dog whimpered and swayed as it ran, fighting the chemicals that tried to coo it to sleep. It wasn't so strong, however, and it slumped on the ground. Half a second later a chunin landed beside it and his eyes widened when he saw a oozing senbon sticking out of the dog's legs and side. Naruto, Iruka whispered and felt for the dog's pulse. He sighed when he found one. He summoned a single shadow clone. Go get Sandame-sama and tell him there's something wrong going on. Take the dog with you. I can't just leave him out here. The clone nodded mutely and ran off to the Sandame's house with the dog hefted on his shoulder. What are you doing, Naruto? He pelted down the road the dog had taken and found a trail of senbon sticking out of the ground. Now he was sure it was Naruto. Naruto was the only genin in the graduating class that specialized in using senbon with this accuracy. Naruto dropped out of the tree line into a small clearing. He set the large scroll against a tree and took off his fox mask. He took in a few deep breaths. What a rush, he said quietly, under his breath. He placed his mask into his backpack and sat down by the scroll in a huff. I should do this more. His goggle-protected eyes glanced over to the scroll and he was about to reach for it until he heard a rustling in the bushes in front of him. He suppressed a small groan when it was Iruka that came out. Iruka-sensei. Naruto, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? Naruto cocked his head to the side innocently, a sight that sent shivers down the chunin's spine because with the eerie moonlight shining down on Naruto he looked like a pale creature born straight from madness and darkness. I don't understand. Don't give me that. His eyes widened even more when he saw the forbidden scroll seated next to Naruto. Naruto saw his expression and he smoothly got to his feet, putting his hands in the silent motion for him to calm down. The forbidden scroll. I can explain. Why do you have it? Did you plan on selling it? You plan on selling Konoha's most treasured secrets? Iruka-sensei, calm down, Naruto said and was carefully approaching the teacher. The man stubbornly stood his ground. I can't let you do. His distraction cost him. 7 spinning stars nailed his side and he fell to the ground. The blood pumping out of his body was incredible. He tried to stumble to his feet but was savagely kicked to a tree courtesy of Mizuki. The silver-haired teacher grinned at Naruto, an evil, toothy grin. He was getting noisy. Naruto watched in fascination as his sensei wheezed for air, correctly judging that his left lung had been punctured by 2 of the shuriken. Quite frankly, I am not surprised you managed to get the scroll, Naruto. You sure do know how to do the impossible, huh? Naruto shrugged. Where is the buyer? Already knowing that there was no buyer. Mizuki, you traitor. Oh, shut up, Iruka. There is no buyer, Naruto-kun. I lied. Shocker, the boy murmured and shook his head. I don't think you understand. I am very sure that Iruka-sensei has somehow notified the Hokage. They'll be here in 20 minutes tops. We don't have time. Acting had always been one of Naruto's strong suits. No, I don't think you understand what's going on. I lied to you. I tricked you, Naruto Uzumaki, and now I am going to get my revenge for everything you've done. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I don't remember doing anything to you. An evil chuckle escaped Mizuki's lips. Do you know why people hate you so much? No, Mizuki. That's an S-rank secret. Iruka managed to wheeze out as he struggled to his feet by supporting a tree. Don't listen to him, Naruto, he's lying. What secret? Naruto asked. That you're the Kyuubi. The Yondaime sealed that thing inside you and now you are the Kyuubi. The traitor removed a Fuma shuriken from his back, and now I am going to finish what the Yondaime started. He hurled the spinning star at Naruto, who he thought was in a daze. Naruto was about to step aside until he felt a small spray of blood on his black shirt. His teacher had taken the weapon for him. Was that really necessary, sensei? He sarcastically asked, but the man had already lost too much blood to know the difference between a sarcastic question and a tearful, soul-wrenching question. You're not the Kyuubi, Naruto-kun. Yes, I figured as much a while ago. Iruka seemed to have tactically ignored what he said. You're a proud shinobi, Naruto-kun, and I am proud of you. He crumpled to the ground bonelessly. Thanks. A split second later he fired a senbon at his teacher's unconscious neck, the amnesia, memory gap drug already taking effect. He wanted his former class teacher to be able to testify in his defense after everything was done. He didn't want to defect from Konoha, yet. He's a fool, Mizuki spat madly. Don't worry, it'll make your death long and painful. It's what I owe you. The silver-haired traitor whipped out a kunai and ran at Naruto. His godmother had already warned him of this sort of thing happening, so he flipped backwards away from a brutal slash aimed for his throat, leading the fight into the denser parts of the forest. A place he thrived the most, as the teacher was looking around for him, swiveling his neck around frantically as he tried to peer into the darkness. Naruto's head slowly protruded out from behind a tree trunk. He licked his lips and accurately fired 5 senbon into the Mont's flak jacket-protected back. The senbon were fired in a straight line, so they all nailed the same place. The man grunted and slashed around blindly. Naruto shot 5 more senbon that jammed into the Mont's thigh, paralyzing it immediately after the last on hit. He tried to limp out of the forest, but Naruto stabbed a needle to Mizuki's neck. The man crumpled to the floor limply. He admired his clean work with a proud smile before he sealed the unconscious man into a storage scroll. A timer started in his mind on how long before Mizuki ran out of oxygen. The boy slipped out of the forest and knelt down beside Iruka. The man was swirly-eyed from the drug and Naruto retrieved his senbon. He tapped the man's cheek to get his attention, and when the inebriated man did, he quickly muttered, "Mizuki tricked me so I could steal the scroll, saying it was to recruit me into a secret faction of the Anbu if I managed to retrieve the forbidden scroll. He planned on killing me, but I overpowered him with shadow clones. You were injured from protecting me. Mizuki was torn apart by my clones and his body parts are all scattered in the wind." Iruka nodded drunkenly. "You won't remember what happened. That is contrary to what I have said." Naruto allowed a small burst of Kyuubi chakra to leave his boy, and not even a minute later numerous Anbu operatives leapt down and surrounded him and Iruka. The Hokage dropped down directly in front of him and ordered for Iruka to be taken to the hospital. The kami of shinobi stared at Naruto and the boy put on his best innocent face. What happened here? Naruto, a person wearing all black ninja uniform, sans the usual flak jacket, ran through Konoha's forest. This person was Naruto and he was wearing his spy uniform. Even his white fox Anbu mask. The boy was running at low Junin speed past Konoha's borders. Stealing the forbidden scroll and revealing a traitor had worked positively for him. The Sandaime, even though he was still highly suspicious of Naruto, had acknowledged that he wasn't to blame for what happened. Naruto may have been classified as a genius, but there was still a lot about Konoha he wasn't aware of. Or so he thought. He had been paid for a full rank mission and Naruto had asked for the money to be paid to him in cash. Then Hiruzen had in-depthly quizzed the boy on how he was able to steal an S-rank scroll from the most protected building in the village. Naruto was in no mood to reveal the real way he had infiltrated the building, so he created a tall tale. He said he had charged head first and bypassed the relaxed Anbu before he broke into the room. This revelation forced Naruto to be re-evaluated completely on his rank. He had found out that he had formerly been placed in Team 8 with Hinata Hyuga and Shino Aburame, but then with his prodigious show of skills in infiltration, Hiruzen insisted that he be re-evaluated. He had a formal re-evaluation scheduled in a week, almost to the corresponding the day before the new genin were getting their teams, but his re-evaluation was set a day before that. He was to report to the Hokage bright and early, spend the whole day being tested in both the written and physical aspects of his knowledge. Naruto agreed to this because if he was in a higher rank he would have a little more freedom. The downside though was that he would have to report to the Sandaime if he wished to do anything outside the village. Now though he had asked Hiruzen for a week to get ready, allowing him free rein to go outside of Konoha. He even permitted the Sandaime to administer a tracking seal on him and for an Anbu squad to be checking in on him every once in a while. The boy's goggles shone a faint red, escaping the eyeholes in his mask. And he could clearly see the small traces of nature chakra in the air. No one was around for miles, besides the small Anbu squad that had been tailing him miles back. That is but nothing he should be too worried about. Naruto's goggles were special in a unique way, disregarding the fact that he could do a number of things with it. He could also see through any genjutsu even if he didn't mentally command it to do so. The downside was that if he went under a henge his goggles would still be in place. The goggles would only disappear if Naruto lowered the genjutsu detection guards on his goggles, allowing the goggles to slip under his own illusion, though this left him open for manipulation through a genjutsu. The fox mask-wearing boy dashed out of the tree line and burst out of the borders of Konoha. Making sure to stay at the very edge of Iwagakure, his planned destination was a country situated beside mountain country, where it was said that Uchiha Madara had destroyed as training before he fought and lost against the Shodem Hokage, Senju Hashirama. The place had been a cursed wasteland ever since, with the soil barely producing any grass, the trees bending scarily and being a little on the malnourished side, though they refused to die, and the broken buildings had been overrun by animals. There were reported to be caves and an intricate cave system under that country in the right climate to house his spiders. His spiders didn't necessarily need vegetation to thrive. Queen had confided in him that she loved raw meat and blood. Animal summons didn't necessarily need food to survive in their own plane, but it had become an unspoken tradition that they would only eat to prove that they were still alive. Naruto had replicated human blood. He called it synthetic mammalian blood, and had been producing and packing them in a corner of his laboratory until the spider summoning realm was created. Queen Spider had said that it didn't have the same luster as real human blood, but when there was no other option it would have to do. Mountain country was not too far from Iwagakure but just within running distance of Konoha. So as Naruto spied the first mountain range as he left Iwagakure's borders, he allowed himself to stop for a break in a tree. The boy lifted his mask and allowed it to rest at the top of his head while he rubbed his face. Tired from all the running, he had been running since sunrise, which was about 5 hours ago, and he was seriously pushing the limits to his stamina. If he was to be ambushed he would have no other option than to reverse summon the Queen Spider to fight for him. He allowed himself an hour to regroup, using it to check over his animal summons creation seal while he idly chomped on an energy bar, drinking some orange juice as well. 30 minutes, and 5 energy bars later, and Naruto was rocketing to the cursed country. He kept running headlong, all the while looking far ahead with his goggles until he abruptly stopped over black soil. The place was just how imagined it. Rocks jutting out of the ground, craters that partially smoked from meteors that sometimes hit there exclusively, numerous cave mouths opened around, and a thin, gently flowing stream passed into a particularly large cave from the ocean, where he assumed the network of caverns and pathways were. All of this still withstanding the fact that the temperature was just right, the weather was fantastic and the sparse vegetation was good. There were dilapidated buildings all around. Some fully crumbled, others barely even able to stay up. Just to be sure that the place was how he heard it was, he summoned dozens of shadow clones to look around while he personally set up a barrier powerful enough to cover the country, which was just small enough for him to cover. A clone popped, informing him that there were small, feral badgers and jackals that roamed far ahead, and another informed him that some lions had claimed a small cliff as their territory. He received memories from another clone that there was a small cave that inhabited blind birds. The budding scientist cancelled his clone jutsu, wincing from the backlash of memories he received. He raised an eyebrow when he saw a small beach made out of black sand. He next summoned more clones and ordered them to round up all of the animals into a single cave. Knock them out and seal them into a scroll. Insects and bugs were exceptions. As his clones left, the original Naruto took his time to draw the intricate infinity seal in where he assumed was the very center of the cursed village. Then he drew 10 more at the edges, just inside the barrier. The barrier was to keep out any more birds or animals from entering while at the same time keep the squad of Anbu back, blocking what he was doing from their vision. 3 hours of tiring work and a clone ran to the original, handing him a scroll and telling him that all the animals were rounded up. The reason he had rounded up the animals was so that after he had scanned the cursed village he would hand them to the spiders to do whatever they deemed fit. For the animals that had managed to escape his clones, it was only a matter of time before they too would be eaten. Naruto smiled to himself at his work and finally made camp for the night near the infinity seal in the middle of the cursed village, making sure to set traps for any animal that wanted to attack him. Tomorrow would be when he would begin scanning and replicating the cursed village. Oh, 1 week later. Konohagakure no Sato Yugo Uzuki glared lightly at Naruto to intimidate him, who was almost even taller than her at just 12 years old, and said, "Uzumaki Naruto, my name is Uzuki Yugo. Do you know why you are here?" They were in room 42 of the academy. Naruto was sitting down on a chair and desk with a pen in his hand. The boy looked like he hadn't slept in days with the dark rings under his goggle-protected eyes and how his skin was now almost a pallid white. He was still wearing his stealth ninja uniform, but his silver senbon launchers were placed on the desk beside him. He was reclined in a relaxed position with his feet propped up on the desk and his fingers were laced together over his chest. When he didn't answer her question fast enough, she snapped, "Naruto." The boy snorted like he had just woken up and he yawned a little into his hand. "I am here to be re-evaluated because I broke into the Hokage's tower and stole the forbidden scroll without anyone noticing." She motioned for him to go on. "I might be a better asset for the village if I am given a higher rank by taking higher missions and making higher risks." She smirked at him. "Did I miss anything?" "Yes, your skills so far have been a well-kept secret by yourself since." She read from a short file about Naruto. "Since you were about 8, your academy scores are astounding. Much more than any average student. We wish to know just how skilled you are." Then why wasn't Uchiha Itachi or Hitaki Kakashi re-evaluated when they left the academy? Yugo skimmed through his academy results and replied, "We have been monitoring their own development since they were born, but you have had a habit of disappearing into your seal-protected apartment after the academy dismisses. Frequent attempts to break the seal have failed because you apparently put the locking seal inside your apartment, rather than outside, which is ingenious if you ask me. You haven't even been seen training or leaving your house to get food, hence this whole re-evaluation. You just admitted that the Hokage and possibly every single ninja in this village has been stalking me since I was 8. Naruto pointed out, a time he had already managed to gamble up enough money to hire a passable seal master to seal his house off, and learn how to make his own seal. Yugo shrugged. "As you may know, your status as Jinchuriki makes you very important, and quite frankly your seclusion makes you a flight risk." "Your honesty is well appreciated," Naruto drawled. "Now about this test." The Anbu captain nodded idly and flipped through Naruto's file and turned around to the teacher's desk, picked up a very thick spiral binder book, dropped it on Naruto's desk with a smirk on her face. "There are 100 multiple-choice questions, and 10 theoretical questions. 110 in total that vary in complexity, length and difficulty. You are to answer all. Multiple-choice questions are to be answered with a 2B pencil. The theory part is with a pen. You have 4 hours to do this. Take your time. Good luck, and your time starts now." She whipped out a stopwatch and clicked the top, just as 4 Anbu guards flipped into the class through the window and stationed themselves at the very corners of the class. "Oh, and no cheating. There are eyes everywhere, not just mine." Naruto sighed mournfully and dropped his pen, shook both of his hands to get them ready before he opened the first page and pursed his lips. All of the questions were incredibly technical, so technical that he had to actually read through it. Once, before he answered them, Naruto wouldn't brag that he knew everything you had to know about being a ninja, but he would admit that with the years of observations Ashitori had recorded, personal observations he had made of ninja and the psychological experiments he had conducted on some civilian children and adults. Most of this before he had learnt the shadow clone techniques at 6. He was fairly sure that he knew more than most Junin. The boy coughed into his fist quietly and licked his lips. He had answered 10 questions already. All 10 were simple calculations he could make without a calculator, so he didn't call for one. He sniffed and rubbed his nose, then his eyes before he answered the 50th question. Something about the right dose of poison to give a 200-pound lion from mountain country to effectively sedate it for 3 hours. He rolled his neck and then rolled his right wrist to get feeling back there after he finished the 80th question, a supposed genin-level question about Madara Uchiha's brother. As he finished the multiple question section with a sigh of relief, he vaguely noticed that 2 hours had already been elapsed. He looked up at his supervisor, who was staring at him with her head propped up in her hands, and spared her a quick smile just as he dug into the theoretical section. Naruto wanted to laugh out loud, but he restrained it to a tight deep breathe. 5 of the questions had to do with animals and a little bit of fuinjutsu. Barely even scraping level 3 of mastery, while 4 were on general history. Going a little bit deeper than what was taught in the academy. Naruto had no intention of holding back any of his knowledge, but he also didn't supply any more than necessary. No use in showboating, he thought to himself. He surmised that the written test was created just for him to give them an all-round knowledge of what he had acquired in 7 years. With or without his shadow clones, Naruto wasn't selfish with what he knew, quite the opposite actually. It was just that he was overly cautious with whom he shared it with, and the entire Konoha shinobi force as well as the civilian populace were in his list of those to never trust. He paused a little on the last question. It was fairly easy to answer and it was written in short, easy to understand words, but he hesitated before he finally answered the question. Who do you think your parents are? This little question had him stuck, not because he didn't know his parents, he did, but he was debating on the effects of revealing it in the long run. Iwagakure was still baying for Namikaze blood and Kumogakure was still baying for Uzumaki sperm. It was inevitable that his status would reach their ears if a spy got his answer sheets. To answer the 10th question he put a code within a riddle. The general rundown was, who lead in a flash and who soaks red with demon's blood? It wasn't his best riddle, but it was what his tired brain could come up with without revealing everything. He dropped his pen and rubbed his eyes. I am done. The Anbu captain smirked and checked her stopwatch. 3 hours, 10 minutes and 6 seconds. I am impressed. Naruto shrugged and stifled a small yawn. You will be given a 30-minute bathroom break and after that you will go to Training Ground 3 for your physical evaluation by another instructor. Again, I wish you good luck. Thank you, Azuki-san. Please, call me Yugo. Naruto sent a thumb up and yawned again. This time a little louder and slinked out of the classroom straight to the bathroom to relieve himself. He splashed some water on his face and perched his goggles on his forehead, revealing his red fox-like eyes that blinked back at him. His pupils quivered and dilated as they struggled to adjust to the light in the well-lit bathroom. As the first signs of a migraine started, he quickly placed his black goggles back on his eyes and rolled his shoulders. He took his time to walk to Training Ground, idly drinking a fruit juice from a can, pineapple and orange juice. Something he kept in large stashes in storage seals on his wrist. He crumbled the can and threw it over his shoulder. He was 10 minutes early, so he used the small opening for a quick nap. He flipped dexterously onto a branch and reclined. He was out faster than he thought, and just as his senses blared 7 minutes later, he whipped an oozing poison senbon from out of nowhere and held it over Hitaki Kakashi's nose. The silent standoff was tense before the Junin chuckled nervously and motioned for the boy to calm down. I didn't mean to frighten you, Naruto. He smiled and fell off the tree, masterfully getting his feet under him like it was nothing and walking off to the center of the training ground where Might Guy stood waiting for them. I wasn't frightened, Naruto grunted as he dropped off the branch and landed smoothly on his feet. Sure you weren't. Kakashi rolled his eye. Do you want to explain to him what's going to happen, Guy, or should I? As Guy was about to open his mouth to holler out something most likely concerning youth, the copy ninja spoke up first. You know what? Don't worry about it, I'll tell him. Guy laughed loudly and again was about to say something else, but Kakashi jumped in just in time. We're going to give you 3 tests. One on genjutsu, taijutsu and all at the same time, including ninjutsu. You ready? Sure, Naruto asked as his goggles glinted red. Genjutsu don't work on me. He slapped away the masked mon's hand when he went to reach for his goggles. Don't touch. Naruto. You really are a youthful youth. Don't mind him. Now for your taijutsu test, Guy, if you don't mind. This must be my cue. Naruto's eyes widened and he hastily used his palms to push down on Might Guy's knee when the spandex-wearing man blazed to him. He grunted and ducked under a roundhouse kick, rolled back from the subsequent axe kick and had to use his silver senbon launchers to hold off a wicked kick sent to him by the green beast. He was harshly pushed back by the blow until his back almost met a tree at the very edge of the training ground. A wide, excited grin came to his lips as his wide eyes stayed on Guy. That was amazing, he muttered, and Kyuubi rolled his eyes. This was the Uzumaki battle lust beginning to show itself. Just like with Kushina, he just hoped that Naruto didn't break both of his arms and tear the muscles in both of his calves like when Kushina's battle lust first reared out its head. The Uzumaki battle lust was a trait in all Uzumaki clan members, whether they were less than a quarter Uzumaki. It could be well controlled or even restrained, but the rush gotten in a good, hard fight could not really be replaced, unless Naruto just had be a small fraction of the Uzumaki populace that were also nymphomaniacs. The great beast shook his head on this though. He knew Naruto, and he wasn't even remotely attracted to the female body, yet anyway, even if he had studied the female anatomy in perfect detail. The two Junin quirked their eyebrows at Naruto's almost even maniacal expression, and so they didn't expect Naruto to crouch on the ground in a wide, tiger-like stance. He lunged forward and skittered to Guy on his feet. The strong style user leaned away from a strike to his head and mentally nodded in respect to the perfectly hidden clawed strike to his stomach. Naruto spun on his feet and swung his leg at the taller man. Guy used his forearm to hold off the attack and went to strike. The blow connected, but Naruto had already leaned back, so the blow only lightly pushed his chest. They held that position for half a second before Guy opened his palm for a palm strike. Naruto bent under the blow and threw his right fist at the Mont's unprotected stomach. Silence reigned as the blow connected. Naruto didn't remain still to revel in his victory though. He was forced to dodge a knee to his chin with his palms again. He did this numerous times while at the same time he kept on sliding back. Each knee kept getting stronger until Naruto abruptly stopped and smoothly flowed around Guy. The taijutsu master expertly anticipated this and he sent a devastating donkey kick to Naruto's chin. The boy grit his teeth as the blow met and his neck snapped upwards. Blood sprayed from his mouth. He fell backwards like a tree and remained still. Guy winced. I might have overdone it, Kakashi. He walked forward and put his pointer and middle fingers on Naruto's neck to check for a pulse. He began to panic when he didn't find one, so he put his ear over the boy's mouth to see if he could feel the boy's breath. Kakashi too furrowed his eyebrows in worry and began to approach until Naruto's eyes snapped open and he wrapped his legs around Guy's neck. The big Junin reared back in shock and began to run in circles as Naruto began smashing his now chakra-enhanced elbow down on the Mont's head. Guy ran head first into a tree, but Naruto had scampered out of the way, so the older man face planted into the tree. The elbows never stopped raining and blood began pouring from the Mont's head. His steps began to get uncertain. He swayed from one side to the other all the while Naruto relentlessly continued his assault. Even adding in a few axe blows, Guy wobbled on his knees and his face turned purple when Naruto wrapped his elbow around the Mont's neck in a sturdy sleeper hold. His legs then summarily locked around his midsection, ever ready to unlock and move out of the way if Guy tried to slam him into a tree. The boy knew, despite his hazy battle lust, that he couldn't dream of matching up to Guy in a straight-up taijutsu fight. Even if the man was going easy on him, quite frankly it was suicidal to think that. His best bet was to play possum, adding to the effect by stopping his own heart for just a few seconds so that Guy would get even closer. He shook his arm, still around Guy's neck, and Guy responded by clawing at the boy's forearms desperately, fighting for each breath that just wasn't coming in anymore. Guy instinctively knew that he wouldn't be able to open any gates for two reasons. The first was that the Hokage had specifically told him to go at high Chunin strength, and then even if he was to try entering the gates he wouldn't be able to. Naruto had somehow found out that if his mind was not focused on one thing he wouldn't be able to open even one gate. The strikes to his head had made him a scatterbrain and the chokehold wasn't helping either. The man drunkenly wobbled around again. He fell on a knee and Naruto violently shook his neck with his blood-painted teeth grit in what could be described as ruthlessness. The shake pushed out more air out of Guy's lungs and his vision began to dim. There was a terrible burning sensation in his chest. He suddenly became incredibly thirsty. In a full minute of struggling for breath he fell on his other knee. Using his weak arms to prop himself up and with another constrictor-like shake of his arm the man fell face first into the ground. Naruto kept the hold on for about 20 more seconds before he cautiously released his grip from the unconscious Mon's neck. Their trail of blood leaving his mouth, probably because of the Junin strength donkey kick he had received. That blow would have done him through if he had not followed the motion and exponentially reduced the force of the blow. It was all about the right timing. Naruto panted a little as he straightened up, idly dusting his stealth ninja uniform and spitting out some blood in a random direction. His eyes trailed to a very impressed Kakashi, who had been watching the taijutsu spar with interest. "Nice trick," the copy ninja said. "Not everyone can stop their heart. Get a jump on Guy and knock him out." Naruto shook his right elbow, the same one he wrapped around Guy's neck, and muffled a sigh of relief when blood returned to its original flow. There, it's an acquired talent. "So you say, I never said you couldn't use weapons or even jutsu. You said the tests in an order and started with genjutsu. Guy-san was the one that came at me. A taijutsu master, instead of you, an all-round master, hence, taijutsu test." Both of them were now circling each other, gauging one another with critical eyes. Kakashi now knew that he couldn't take Naruto lightly. He really didn't want it getting out that he had succumbed to a sleeper hold. Asuma would never let him hear the end of it. Known to both shinobi, there were shinobi filling up around the training ground to watch what they hoped was an old-school beating. A few Chunin had even pulled Guy away and were trying to revive him. "That's very perceptive. Now's the last test. No restrictions, but don't worry kid, it'll go easy on you." He smiled jovially before he blurred at Naruto. "That would be your mistake, Kakashi-san." Naruto rolled aside from a downward punch that almost even shattered the ground and jumped over a swing from a kunai that had slid into the copy ninja hand. The airborne boy snapped his right leg forward and Kakashi leaned away. The sandaled foot wafted in front of his face and even clipped a few silver hairs away from his forehead. The boy landed on one foot with his hands planted on the ground and flipped his body over. Kakashi crossed his arm to hold off the awkward-looking stomp. Throwing his arms out and pushing Naruto away, the boy flipped back to both of his feet and held up a fist full of senbon. With a sharp gesture they were thrown at his older opponent. He powered through a few hand seals, multiple shadow senbon technique. The Junin was forced to dive away from the barrage and run away from the dozens more that tried to pepper him with holes. He caught Naruto going through more hand seals, shadow senbon rain technique. He threw his hands to the sky, 10 senbon flying high into the sky afterwards. Kakashi felt a foreboding feeling begin to churn in his gut and he was proven correct when a fluffy blue cloud started spitting out poison needle after poison needle. The man yanked out 2 kunai and spun them in their rings to deflect each senbon expertly. He grunted in discomfort when he felt something stab clean through his side and out the other side, just before he exploded into smoke. Shadow clone, Naruto thought, and his senses blared madly in his mind. He cancelled his former jutsu and jumped up just in time to prevent Kakashi from grabbing his feet. The copy ninja looked on as Naruto fired a senbon out of senbon launchers. The man crumbled to clumps of earth when they met. Naruto lightly landed on his feet. Kakashi was hiding again. He carefully looked around, making sure to spread out his senses. He then lifted his right leg when a dog tried to bite into his calf. He didn't even need to look before he fired a senbon to knock out the dog. His senses were telling him that Kakashi was sitting on a tree branch, and he was proven right after he threw a barrage of shuriken there. The copy ninja dropped from the tree and rolled to Naruto. His own kunai held in a reverse grip. Both of them clashed, kunai on senbon, when they met in the middle. The older, stronger man pushed Naruto back and threw his weapon at the boy. The boy deflected the knife with his long needle but grunted when a fist was planted into his chest. The blow pushed him back, but the copy ninja continued his onslaught. The drilling blows got faster and faster until Naruto's back met a tree. Kakashi pulled his hand back and let a devastating punch smash into Naruto's unprotected cheek. Blood exploded out of the boy's mouth and his head lolled to the side. Kakashi stepped back to admire what he had done, fully expecting Naruto to at least fall on his knees, but he was sorely disappointed. The boy was swaying on his feet, his hair shadowing his face ominously and his chest heaving in deep breaths. The audience waited with bated breaths for Naruto to pass out, but the boy chuckled lowly, blood and spit leaking from the sides of his mouth. "I've felt worse, from my clones, Dog-san." He spit defiantly at Kakashi, and a well-timed snap kick met his other cheek. He exploded into chakra smoke on contact. "He switched when I kicked him. Why didn't he switch when I was punching him?" His eye looked around lazily until his pointer and middle finger snapped up and caught a blow dart just before it met his nose. Blow darts? Really? He snorted, and just then the dart exploded into purple smoke. The masked ninja inhaled everything. The effect was immediate. The monk's body locked up, making him stand and fall straight like a tree. And blood exploded out of his nose, his tightly clenched teeth, and his ears. Naruto limped out of the forest, supporting his right ribs and rubbing his bruised cheek. He glared at Kakashi venomously, relishing in the blood that kept spurting out of his nose. He knelt down beside the wide-eyed man and whispered, "Venom gotten from a devil's spinster spider is basically useless. You can use it to bath and nothing would happen to you." Making most think that what is there isn't venom at all. What most don't know is that when you mix this venom with something as ordinary as water before it is ingested, it would create a cascade of problems to a person or even an animal. He poked the masked man's forehead. The man winced but couldn't unclamp his teeth to get any word out. "Full body paralysis, your kidneys are shutting down and your lungs are collapsing. You are feeling an intense pain in your gut, and in about 60 seconds you are going to drown in your own blood." Naruto nodded solemnly. "The pain you are in now, just flicking your ear would be like hitting your toes with a mallet." A sly, twisted smirk spread on Naruto's face after he said this, but he shook his head at the frantic pleas Kakashi was saying through his eye. I thought all shinobi weren't meant to fear death, though he still jammed a needle filled with blue liquid into Kakashi's chest. The antidote spread through the monk's body and he sighed in relief. "I am not sure Hokage-sama would like it if I killed one of his most prized Junin." He leaned in close and whispered even more quietly, "Yet." Kakashi sat up and began vomiting the blood from his lungs when he finally got feeling into his arms and legs. He was gulping in air desperately. Naruto watched all of this with an amused smile on his face. "I take it I passed this test, Kami damn it, kid," Kakashi said after he spat out some blood. "What was that all about?" "You said I should NT hold back, I didn't." Naruto got up once he felt his ribs were stable enough, already making plans to fix himself up in his lab. "Report to Hokage-sama's office at noon tomorrow for your results." Naruto carefully sat down in front of the village leader inside the cage's office. He pulled down his hoodie and reclined in his chair. Under his red hoodie he was wearing his pure black stealth ninja uniform. Hiruzen Sarutobi scowled lightly and rubbed his face with his palm. "Before I tell you your results, I want to tell you the process we used to mark it. To show that we didn't change any scores or tamper with your results. The entire village may not like Konoha." Sarutobi wasn't above including himself, but the fact still remained that Naruto was treated as close to any other person in the village. Jinchuriki status or not, this meant that his academy results were not changed. He wasn't chased out of the class for any outlandish reason, and he was given the same treatment as any other student. Naruto nodded and got a little more comfortable in his seat. "Your test was marked by 10 top-grading Enbu operatives, then by Azuki Yugo, and finally by me. Your physical test was graded by Guy, Kakashi, Yugo, Shikaku Nara, and also me." "Okay, so how did I do?" Naruto said as he again relaxed in his offered seat. Here Sarutobi had to light a pipe and smoke it for a minute, to calm him down. He then reached to the lone file on his desk and flipped it open to the first page. "In your multiple choice questions you got 98 correct, and that was only because you changed your mind twice. Hi, ninja must always be decisive, there are no second chances in the field." Hiruzen nodded in agreement. "Right, your theory part was, it was amazing. An average Junin wouldn't know who the progenitor of ninjutsu, not ninshu, is, not to talk of even explaining how the human chakra network works. I read a lot of things. No matter, you got top marks there too. Can you tell me just where you get your information from?" "The library. You are a ninja of Konoha and I should NT withhold information from my superior in rank. I have just told you where I got the information in your test. The library. Pretty much everything the test asked could be found in the library if you dug deep enough." "Fine. Your physical aspect was astounding, Naruto." Hiruzen flipped to the last page and spread a few pictures on his desk of Naruto playing dead. Putting Guy into a sleeper hold, poisoning Kakashi, giving Kakashi the antidote, whispering a few things to Kakashi, among many more things that happened that day. Despite the fact that you were less experienced in taijutsu than both Junin, you were able to keep a level head, plan ahead and add in a little deception. I honestly didn't know gases could enter a blow dart. Naruto didn't answer. He chose to stare outside the window at the noon sun. 4 of your examiners have said that you were Junin material. Naruto blinked and furrowed his eyebrows. Really? Yes, really, you seem surprised. I am. I would have at least thought they'd recommend me to be a Chunin. You were able to outsmart 2 of my best Junin, even though they were holding a lot back and the written test you took was the standard Junin exam. We just added 50 more questions. I have also thought of awarding you Junin as well. Really? Naruto asked in bewilderment. From Genin to Junin, that's a big jump. People will start asking questions. That is why I have come up with an idea, another few tests. Naruto stifled a groan and closed his eyes. More tests. Hiruzen glared at the boy. Allow me to finish. I personally think you are ready for the promotion, but others may think otherwise, so I will give a rank I call Trail Junin until your next tests are completed. Trail Junin? Yes, a Junin but under the rank of Tokubetsu Junin, but higher than Chunin Commander, so that meant, technically speaking, that Naruto was already a Junin, Trail Junin, until he was done with the tests. I am not completely sure what you're saying. I can't handle a team and leadership as a core trait in a Junin, right? No, it isn't. Making critical, wise decisions under pressure is a core trait in a Junin. Okay. Now why am I not given Tokubetsu Junin? Because you are going to perform 3 highly ranked missions to prove your worth. If you pass those I will award you with Tokubetsu Junin. After that if you impress me enough and build up your mission quota then I'll consider promoting you to full Junin. You would not believe the headache your flash promotion is giving me. The Hokage had the option of not promoting Naruto at all, but the fact still remained that he would unbalance any team he would be placed in. If he was still on Kurene's team he would beat her easily because Genjutsu didn't affect him with his goggles on. He had shown the ability of outsmarting Kakashi and Guy. What says he wouldn't do it again? Making him a Chunin would also be problematic. Every Chunin was placed in a team and all had shown that they could work with each other. It could not get any more obvious that Naruto was a lone wolf when it would have to come to missions. The boy had shown maturity far higher than one his age was supposed to have. This was a good thing but a bad thing because it would make him impatient and short-tempered if his teammates, Genin or Chunin, didn't reach his level. Add in the fact that Naruto showed virtually nothing based on his skills he couldn't have guessed on his own. Each mission is a solo mission. Naruto sighed in relief and rubbed under his eyes, but since you are a Trail Junin you will be supervised by a squad of my best Anbu. They will not interfere unless your life is in danger. Fine by me. The Sandaime then pulled a drawer open and pulled out an unmarked file from inside. He slid the file on his desk to Naruto and the boy sat up, caught the file and flicked it open. Your first mission is to travel to the edge of Fire Country and rescue the Fire Daimyo's 6-year-old daughter from her kidnappers. Yesterday a band of bandits led by a single B-rank ninja ambushed the girl's traveling carriage on her way to Sanagakure to visit her pen pal, the Sand Daimyo's 6-year-old daughter. Naruto hummed in thought. Weren't there fire guardians with her? No. Do you know why? Hiruzen shrugged. This exciting mission aside, are you sure the daimyo would approve you sending a 12-year-old Trail Junin to rescue his only child? What he doesn't know won't kill him. Besides, I am sending an Anbu squad with you as backup. We already have a contingency plan if anything goes bad. Has a ransom been sent? Not yet. Quite frankly I am not sure the daimyo himself knows his daughter has been kidnapped. Naruto masterfully pieced together what the Hokage was saying. His daughter was under our protection when she was kidnapped. Hiruzen hesitated before he nodded. Low-ranked Chunin to guard the Fire Lord's own child. That's gonna get you in some hot shit. When the Sandaime was about to retort but Naruto quickly raised his hands for the older man to calm down. Hey, that's just my opinion. I accept this mission. Good, you leave right now. Naruto shrugged off his hoodie and slipped it into a backpack he wore under his hoodie. As he walked out of the front door of the cage's tower he took off to the gate. The bandits that had kidnapped the young member of the royal family had taken residence in a run-down pillow factory at the very edge of Fire Country. Naruto crouched inside a thick shrub, his goggles sticking out a little from the bush. He motioned his Anbu supervisors to get down. 2 guards on the roof holding crossbows. 50 paces forward is the building but no cover, he muttered to himself. Need some help, kid? A tiger mask wearing whispered. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows as he looked around, then back to the 2 guards. No, I've got an idea. Tenzo stepped back and watched as Naruto pulled out a senbon from his pocket and wrapped a one-way switch seal on it. The boy took a deep breath and quick as a flash he threw the senbon accurately at a guard while at the same time he fired a senbon from its launcher. Both needles nailed the guards on their foreheads. He crossed his forearms and muttered, "Switch." A small plume of smoke later and Naruto touched down on the roof. In his former location was the dead bandit. "Impressive, it wasn't my idea but effective enough," Tenzo said, and Kat signed for them to follow after him. With Naruto, the boy allowed 2 long senbon to stick out of their launchers, reaching about 6 inches out of their silver launchers. He wasn't wearing his mask, so he touched his goggles and it shone a faint orange. Just as he dove head first into the roof door, he made sure to run at his stealth limit, high chunin. His senses as well as his eyes told him that the apparent leader was in the foreman's office while there were 3 guards situated in front of the door. The other bandits were guarding the back of the building in slow rotations. The thing about bandits was that they were either failed ninja or ninja wannabe civilians. They weren't this organized. The B-rank ninja that led them must have been a good leader. The problem for the leader laid in the fact that he didn't have that many bandits to lead in the first place. Naruto looked around the corner carefully and latched onto the ceiling. He quietly scared behind the bandits, and when they were about to look up he threw a kunai in a random direction. The weapon clanked on the wooden ground and the guards swarmed at it. Naruto though carefully leveled his launchers but refrained from using them. He opted to throwing 3 oozing needles, and when they hit their necks began to corrode. The rundown pillow factory had been abandoned about 10 years ago for reasons he didn't wish to find out, and it was located in a thick forest. This meant that light didn't really go in. He carefully pushed open the door to the office and skittered inside, barely even making a sound. He spied the 6-year-old quivering royalty staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes while the apparent leader was relieving himself in the bathroom. He slowly put his fingers on his lips, telling her to keep quiet, and he sighed lightly in relief when she frantically nodded while putting her hands over her mouth. He also told her to close her eyes by putting both of his hands over eyes. A moment of indecision reached her when she remembered that her hands were over her mouth, but it was solved when she strongly pursed her lips and covered her eyes with her hands. Naruto steeled his eyes and hung over the bathroom door. Idle whistling escaped as the man left the bathroom. The man paused at the door when he saw the 6-year-old, still shaking in fear, with her hands over her eyes and her mouth pursed tightly. "What are you doing, kid?" he said in a gruff voice, but the girl frantically shook her head. "I can sense you too, whoever you are." No use hiding then. Naruto dropped from the ceiling on the man, but he was abruptly grabbed by his throat. On contact he burst into smoke. In his place was a single explosive seal tag that latched strongly on the mont's arm. It exploded half a second later, but instead of fire what came out was green, lethal smoke. The man inhaled it all. Naruto, wearing a gas mask under his goggle-protected eyes, gently fixed another smaller gas mask onto the girl's face. The girl was looking up at him with bright stars sparkling in her eyes, masterfully ignoring the violent hacking coughs her captor was making. Naruto beamed at her. "Are you okay?" The girl hesitated for a moment. "Are you my knight in shining armor?" Her voice had an adorably childish squeakiness to it. Naruto raised an amused eyebrow, turning his head so he could watch as the B-rank ninja stumbled around the office, blood spurting out of his nose, ears, mouth and eyes, in a way. Yay! The celebration was muffled by her gas mask. She immediately hugged Naruto's midsection. He hurriedly refrained from violently reacting to the contact. He never liked being touched without his permission. The blonde boy patted her head. "Get on my back and hold on tight." He could just feel the amusement his Anbu supervisors were looking at him with. The girl buried her head into his neck, again not looking at the bloody sight of her captor. The man he had poisoned was now slumping off a wall. His breathing was shallow and irregular. As Naruto left the room he looked back for one brief moment. His poison had worked like a charm. It was not spider poison he used, rather it was a cross between herbicide and centipede poison, making the combination immediately explode into gas once combined. Naruto had sucked the gas into a storage scroll once that happened. It was similar to what he had done to Kakashi in the sense that the dart he threw had a thin wire that separated the mixtures inside until it finally burnt through when Kakashi jolted it as he caught it, though in this case the mixtures were unsealed simultaneously in their liquid forms, and due to this they combined. The larger either of the liquids were the more toxic. Your next mission is to capture Eritajijo, a rogue Konoha ninja who had been sending information to Grass Country. I don't know to who or even why. How was he caught? Naruto asked as he skimmed the file. We managed to decipher a coded message that was sent to him by an unknown person from Grass. We found it on his desk. To clarify, he's an average chunin that used to work as your secretary. Correct. How long do you suspect he has been a spy? Not too long. He hasn't left the village in years, but the one time he left for a mission he begins acting suspiciously. This was 2 days ago, when I was taking my tests. Yes, I don't think he has sent anything of value yet, but we have to get him to confirm. He should be alive, not unwounded, am I correct? He should at least be able to speak coherently. I don't care if you cut his arms off, just leave his mind intact. Naruto snapped the file closed. I accept. Good, my trackers say he's running through the desert to Sanagakure. If you run fast enough you'll catch up. Orochimaru didn't seem too happy it was a 12-year-old Konoha had sent to retrieve him. Naruto didn't need to be stealthy, so he ran at his fastest, mid to high Junin's speed, to catch up with the Chunin missing ninja that had wanted to seek sanctuary in Sanagakure. That wasn't the smartest of ideas because with Suna allied to Konoha, missing ninja from either village couldn't seek sanctuary in the other, and if so they were obligated to hand these nuke nin to their villages. Naruto had a camo red scarf wrapped around his mouth and nose to prevent harsh sand from entering his lungs. Orochimaru looked incredibly tired. He was running blindly through a sandstorm with the crook of his elbow covering his nose for protection. To pass by the man, Naruto applied a burst of chakra to his legs. The sandstorm subsided a little, allowing the Chunin to open his eyes and look at Naruto. A visible twitch came to his eyebrows. Pardon me, but this is a formality. Orochimaru, by order of the Hokage you are to return to Konoha and face punishment for your crimes. Come peacefully or I will have no option but to use force. Naruto droned like he was reading from a book. They sent a kid. And it's the Kyuubi brat too. Are you coming peacefully or not? The answer was obvious, but he wanted Orochimaru to say it himself. Hell no, I'd rather cut you up into little pieces and feed you to the desert snakes. Naruto hummed and secured his scarf a little tighter around his nose. 2 forearm-long senbon slid out of his launchers and locked in place. The boy positioned one arm pointing down. The long senbon was touching the sand and the other was arched over his head like a pincer. At least give me a challenge, the Chunin snorted as he ran at Naruto and sent over a brutal uppercut. Naruto leaned away from the blow, his legs firmly locked in place. And the long senbon that was pointing to the sand slashed upwards at the Mont's flak jacket-protected stomach. Creating a thin, bubbling path through it, the Chunin missing ninja pushed away from the brutal blow, but this allowed Naruto to bring down the overhead pincer on his opponent. Carving a bubbling line through his Chunin flak jacket diagonally, and passing through his first stomach slash, Orochimaru hissed in pain and swung his leg in a roundhouse kick, but Naruto used both of his long senbon to block the blow, grabbing the offending leg and twisting it harshly. The result was the leg snapping with a spine-tingling crack. He refused to let go of the leg, bringing the older man down face first into the ground and poking his long senbon into his opponent's neck. Orochimaru struggled on the ground for a minute before he abruptly fell asleep. That was much easier than I thought, Naruto murmured and hefted the unconscious ninja onto his shoulder, beginning his return run back to Konoha. He underestimated you, Naruto, Yugo said as his Anbu supervisors joined him, possibly out of nowhere. It was his mistake, Mantis said from Naruto's right. It's every ninja's mistake to underestimate his opponent. Hi, but you did a great job. You didn't even move your feet, Tiger said. What did you call that style again? 4-legged spider style, Naruto puffed out. Why only 4 legs? Spiders have 8, Yugo asked. It's a work in progress. The shadow-legged spider style was an invention of Naruto he had gotten when he had observed a swamp rat spider hunt a rat he had let into his enclosure-like container. His style made use of obvious attacks and defenses but well-hidden counter-attacks. It made primary use of extra-long senbon coming from his launchers, but when he had to face off against Mizuki he used his pointer and middle finger to replace them. So far though his most powerful form was the 4-legged shadow spider. Standing with his feet shoulder-length apart and bending down at the ready, his right arm hooking over his head and pointing to his opponent like a pincer while his left pointed down to the ground, serving as his defense counter-strike arm or leg, the style emphasizes staying on the ground unless it couldn't be helped and raw. Deceptive power with a vast knowledge of poisons. Plans on how to manifest more legs for his taijutsu style were already underway. He just needed a few more confirmation tests. Oh. How did I do? Stellar performance. Cat reported that you didn't waste any movement or do any flashy jutsu. Hiruzen admitted as he organized his desk, ready to call it a night. Naruto had made a new record for himself by completing 2 rank missions in 2 days. The boy had stopped by his office just after he dropped Eritajijo with the T&I department. No jutsu was needed in the mission. That fact notwithstanding, you should be proud of what you have done. Your supervisors speak highly of you. Shikaku even wants you to enter the Anbu. Naruto shook his head. I would prefer it if I was a regular Junin. I still have a lot to learn. The Hokage pursed his lips but nodded. Here is pay for both missions. He handed Naruto a sealed scroll filled with his payment. Before I forget, my advisors have seen promise in you. One of them wishes to personally train you. I believe I reached where I am without much help. With all due respect, I'll be fine on my own. My student, Jiraiya, also wants to train you. He wants you to be his apprentice. He will give you the Toad signing contract as well as teach you how to use the Kyuubi's chakra. Is this the same student that writes porn and peeps on women in his free time? A large sweat drop formed on Hiruzen's forehead. I see your point, so that's a no, even to the Toad summoning contract. Naruto nodded. Since you're declining, I might as well tell you that he is your godfather. So the legendary Toad Sage is my godfather. I have to say he's doing a horrible job at it. He gave you those goggles, didn't he? No, my godmother did. Hiruzen paled and he gaped. Orochimaru? Hi, she's actually really good with seals. Have you spoken with her before? No. Good. You have to stay away from her. She's nothing but trouble. I am now legally an adult, Hokage-sama. With all due respect, I can make my own decisions. The old Hokage clenched his fists on his desk and glared at the young boy. I am ordering you as your Hokage. You're ordering me not to associate with my own godmother, but you want me to associate with my godfather, whom you both trained. Can I ask why? Orochimaru is nothing but trouble. The heinous experiments she committed have soiled her name in this village. She loved my father like her own brother. Minato was a man with the largest heart in the world. He saw the good in everything and everyone. She manipulated him for most of his life, but Jiraiya saved him from further manipulation. Naruto nodded slowly and refrained from rolling his eyes. He didn't believe one word the Sandaime was saying. The fact remains. I am not training under your advisor or Jiraiya. If I was still a genin, I wouldn't have an option, but since I am not. Fine. How are you going to train with the Kyuubi's chakra? I have my ways, Naruto replied shortly. Now about my last mission. Your last mission will be the one of the most importance. We have found out that there is an underground slave trade empire in Fire Country. He handed Naruto a slightly heavy file, stocked filled with pictures of slaves an unidentified informant had discreetly taken. Naruto read through it carefully. Do you know the identity of this informant? Of course I do. He is a Rouge Inuzuka named Ringo. So his status as a missing ninja is a cover to get into this empire. Yes, he has reported that he is now a driver in this slave trade empire. For how long? A year now, but I was only made aware of this last week. The empire has been operating in the shadows and we only found out because we found a tag the back of a girl's hand. It's in your mission specs. Naruto looked at the tag that was apparently given to every slave in the slave ring. It was a square with a needle and a chain passing through it. Naruto suspected that a tracking seal was administered under the seal. The file he read told him that submission of the slaves was done the old-fashioned way. By whipping, torturing and defiling them. It might have not been savory for most to look at, but Naruto was not considered most people. He didn't support unnecessary confrontation or violence, but he did support doing things for an end, and what the Sav masters were doing was mostly for profit. The file included a detailed diagram of the complex the slaves were housed as well as the underground network they were transported through, the location of every black market that bought these slaves, either their body parts or their whole bodies, with an added list of their main buyers. 2 prominent names stuck out. Gato from Gato Shipping Company, the owner and controller of the Elemental Nation's 3rd top transport company and number 1 water transport company. Naruto didn't need to be told that the short, fat man didn't only transport food and clothing from one place to another. A man of his stature must have started off with peddling drugs. Naruto was 100% sure that one of his many smuggling contacts currently outside of Konoha made use of the Gato Shipping Company. or any of the other shipping companies, to bring an exotic animal close to Konoha's borders, where it was picked up by a contact inside Konoha that posed as a food or even textile merchant. The animals were heavily sedated so they wouldn't move around the cart to draw Anbu attention. The merchants he used were well-known and well-respected members of the public. It was funny to think that even the Hokage wasn't aware of the depth corruption that was buried in Konoha. The second name that stuck out was Kitsugami Gumo from Kitsugami Drug Company. A drug company that had only surfaced 2 years ago but was already paving the path towards becoming an empire. Barely anything was known about Kitsugami himself except that he always wore a wide-brimmed hat and pinstriped suit. A vague picture was taken of him shaking hands with a popular crime lord named Toru Nobumi. It was in a dimly lit restaurant where it was most likely past midnight. The file said that Kitsugami surfaced the same day his business did, but so far a clear picture of him was never taken and his movements were never truly confirmed. Naruto smirked to himself when he saw another picture of Kitsugami Gumo. The man was sitting in the top stands of an underground wrestling ring, whispering something into the ear of a fat man that sat beside him. The man was in the middle of laughing wholeheartedly at what Kitsugami had said. The next picture was of all the rich delegations watching the wrestling, laughing at the joke Kitsugami had said. The information on Kitsugami was so thin. They were in the dark on how rich he was, how he got his drugs, who was under his employ and so many other things. Quite frankly, the fact that his name was even on the list was subject to question. The last confirmed picture was when Kitsugami was entering a butcher's shop. This was the vaguest of all the pictures, seeing as it was very grainy and brown-scaled. The picture had the man looking at the cameraman from the corner of his eyes. His coal-black pupils only glinted slightly. Knowingly, Naruto would have to be sure he was more careful next time. So you want me to tear it down? Can I ask why I am not given a team? You have admitted with your own mouth that you cannot lead, so you are going to have to make do with your clones if you want. But my supervisors will still be coming with me, Naruto said with a faint mocking undertone in his voice. Yes, merely to look over it all. I've got a good grasp of this mission, but I have to ask, what is my specific objective in this mission? I want the leader of this slavery ring contained and every other underling there dead if it can't be helped. The victims' safety should be your top priority. So I somehow have to gain entrance into this place, bring it down and escape with the leader and about. He skimmed his file with his lips pursed. 463 slaves and 4 heavily pregnant teenagers. A structure protected by many highly ranked missing shinobi. Am I missing anything? No, that's pretty much it, Sarutobi said with a sharp smirk. So basically you're sending me on a suicide mission, Naruto said as he leaned back in his chair with his right leg crossed on his left knee. He was still idly reading the mission folder, without any backup and with conditions that might very well kill me under the effort. Pretty much, yes. Do you accept? Naruto hesitated. Ways he could break into the slavery ring running through his mind, and those ones came easily, but how to break out with all those lives he was apparently responsible for? It wouldn't be easy, not by a long shot, but nothing ever stopped him. Nothing, I accept. The boy knew what the Hokage was getting at. So far he hadn't shown all that much skill-wise, so this almost impossible mission would force more of his secrets out into the light, and when it got too much for him his supervisors would tactfully step in and take over the mission. You sneaky old fart. He matched the old Hokage's smirk with his own and stood up. Is there a time limit? Oh no, take your time. Sarutobi waved. Just get the job done. Lives are on the line. You are gambling the lives of people, just so you can know what I know, so you can know what I can do, Naruto stated with a twisted smirk. He began walking out of the office. I hate secrets, especially when it comes to you, child. Naruto paused and said over his shoulder, you might not like what I know, old man, and I will succeed in this mission. Just wait and see. He marched out of the office. Oh well see, the Sandame muttered. Oh. The budding child scientist sped out of the gates at high speed, his supervisors unfailingly falling behind him, now made up of 3 platoons of Anbu operatives, watching his every move. Naruto looked over his shoulder and sent a 2-fingered salute to his superiors. He then leapt into a tree and began tree hopping to where his mission specs had said the slave ring was located. The slave ring had taken the underground fact quite literally. There was a single opening in a mountain guarded by half a dozen burly waterfall missing ninja, probably B rank. He covered his goggles so the guards wouldn't see them tint orange then back to black. He couldn't suppress the small glow for now. His night vision allowed him to see how the front gate was set up. It was a humbly built out of solid stone and wood, with decorative iron support pillars at sides. There were two main gates, one that allowed people in and one that allowed people. And by people he meant the slavers that carted new slaves that were fully restrained and contained in large vehicles that, after zooming in on one, were powered by a few unhealthy-looking male slaves turning a pedal-like rotor so the apparent driver could give the vehicle a direction. His vision only allowed him to see different shades of green so he couldn't note the colors, but what he was able to see was enough for him. Sadly though, since there was no other light on in the twin gates, all the guards were wearing night vision goggles too. He pursed his lips tightly and counted the guards manning the two main gates. 14 guards, 7 in each, and most were probably sensors. This was proved when one of the shinobi manning the in-gate placed his hand on a vehicle and waved for it to continue inside. It was a good thing that touch sensors or even full sensors were relatively rare in the elemental nations, and that those that were patient enough to train to get this ability were even rarer. So far there were 4 touch sensors, 3 in the in-gate and 1 in the other, and none of them had touched the ground. Probably not for long though. The map in his mission specs said that past the gates was an opening in a mountain where the vehicle would travel downwards to an underground network where the slaves can be distributed to black markets. The security inside was top quality, but there was no fuinjutsu he should have to worry about. As another large vehicle rumbled towards the gate, he got an idea on how he would be able to get in. Naruto-san. He heard a soft whisper behind him, but he didn't turn to acknowledge the person. He just turned his head a little to the side and hummed. Yes. His plan wasn't dependent on the time, but he would rather get the mission over with. He could basically feel the pity the platoons of Anbu had for him as they hid in the shadows, ready for any action. It was Yugao, the cat mask-wearing captain, that had whispered for his attention, making Naruto realize that he had been observing the gate for 30 minutes. The Anbu captain slipped to his side stealthily and looked at him through her mask coolly. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was my sensei, my senpai and my captain. Naruto still hadn't turned to look at her. There was a slight downward twitch in the side of his lips. What are you trying to tell me, Yugo-san? I am saying that I am rooting for you. Much appreciated. Naruto didn't need luck. He needed everything in his repertoire. He was merely humoring the purple-haired woman. He also didn't need the pity the Anbu were giving him, but he shrugged them off. Most expected him to create an army of clones and bum rush the base, but he surprised them by creating only one. He handed the clone a thick roll of paper and said, "You know the plan?" "Hi, boss," the clone whispered and ran head first towards the gates. The alarm sirens blared as the guards caught sight of the clone. There was a major security flaw that the Konoha missing ninja had unknowingly written in the mission specs. The leader of the slave ring believed that all the security he ever needed was meant for the only gates to the base. So if there was ever to be an attempt to break in, more than 97% of the shinobi were to focus on containing the breach, leaving the leader to be guarded by his top guard, a female 16-year-old samurai simply called Aoki-chan. A bit of overkill, but it was Naruto's gap, and he took this gap like a pro. The gates and the entrance to the slave ring was sealed shut with steel gates as thick as Naruto's arms. Naruto's clone made sure to change the direction he was running it to the forest to his far right. Where he guessed a waterfall was located, the shinobi and Kanochi under this mysterious leader poured after him relentlessly, armed with every possible weapon imaginable. It was like watching a man trying to outrun a tsunami. Except this man was using his flexibility to dodge any attempt to grab him until he and his chasers were far into the forest. This was what happened if you leave security in the hands of a cocky, overconfident and proud civilian. The clone quickly stopped when he reached a small cliff and jumped over the edge. The shinobi followed after him. He stopped his run to the waterfall when he saw shinobi standing there. He looked back and more shinobi behind him. The ninja began to surround him and slowly move in, the weapons at the ready to either subdue him or cut him to pieces. They readied their weapons though when the clone unsealed 2 small pills. One green, the other one brown. He tossed both into his mouth and bit down strongly. Toxic green chakra strings exploded out of his pores and any attempt at cutting them failed since they were sticky to the touch. The strings wrapped around the ninja and drew them to the clone, who brought out the roll of paper he had initially unsealed the pills from. As the ninja were about 2 feet from him, he channeled chakra into the roll. A giant plume of green smoke covered all, visible. Thick veins began etching on the now free shinobi, seeing as the clone had unsummoned itself. and white foam dribbled out of their mouth. They held their throats and hacked. Then a switch went off in their heads, like an almighty switch that only Kami had the authority to touch. And they snapped upright as one, and blood burst from their ears and noses like geysers. They died not more than a second later. The Anbu shinobi that watched over this happening couldn't help but be a little impressed at what Naruto's clone had done without question or hesitation. The plan was to take the shinobi force in the slave ring as far away as possible from their base and kill them all at once with a poison mixture that had been locked into an explosive tag seal matrix, which was now referred to as explosive poison. It didn't leave any survivors since he had used more than a dozen rolls of the explosive poison. The original Naruto took this massive gap to blur to the gate. He wasted no time to whip out a purple liquid oozing senbon and cut it through the metal grates blocking the entrance to the slave ring. Even though it required him used 5 senbon, he succeeded in hacking through. Behind the grated metal wall was a wide tunnel where the vehicles lugged people to, and from the very center, this was the time he created dozens of clones to his side. Find the people and guide them here. I'll handle the leader. Hi, boss. The clones said as one, even throwing in sharp salutes before they disappeared to the central location of the slave ring. Long senbon sharply came out of Naruto's launchers and clicked in place. The boy ran with high Junin speed through the darkness, and when he sensed light he deactivated his night vision. Choosing to switch to seeing chakra networks, the main slavery ring was a place where hundreds of cages were stored, filled with people that huddled together for warmth. Naruto spied his clones coaxing them out of their cages and following after a few other clones that were marching to the exit. The original Naruto ran above the cages on a thick electrical wire that supplied electricity to the leader's office, the passageway the large vehicles used to transport slaves, and the gates. Naruto stopped on the floor the leader's office was. The door opened and out stepped a woman in a red and white schoolgirl-style miniskirt that had a penguin tail that reached the back of her knees, showing off sleek legs that were tucked into white knee-high socks and equally white trainers. She also had on a white schoolgirl's button-up shirt that was tied at her midriff, exposing her chiseled and well-tanned abdomen. The woman had short shoulder-length black hair and a lollipop in her mouth. In her right hand she held a black sheath with a peculiar-looking katana inside. The handle was red and white with wind designs over it. Aoki-chan used her free hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear and eyed Naruto. Her amusement was almost palpable. "You lost, little boy?" She cooed and puckered her ruby-red lips, which still happily sucked on her lollipop. Naruto didn't answer her. He got into his four-legged spider position and lowered his center of gravity a little. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" "Don't worry, this same reaction happens with the help. This can go in either way. You allow me to get your leader and take him back to my village, or I go through you and do it anyway." The teen gave a short laugh. "Bigger men, and women, have tried, none have succeeded." "You haven't fought me before," Naruto replied. "You're too cute, makes me want to pinch your cute little cheeks." She cooed again to get a rise out of the boy, but the boy merely blinked. "Just standing here I have come up with 7 ways to defeat you. I like your confidence, kid, but it won't help you." She flicked her black sheath off her sword to reveal the glinting silver blade. "If you knew me, Aoki-san, you'd know that I don't like failing, so I don't fail." It was Naruto that charged first. He ran at the girl with his pincer senbon clattering on the ground before he used his right hand to stab at her. She clanged her blade against his super long needle effortlessly and brought up her knee to jam into Naruto's stomach. The boy allowed the blow to connect and used the contact to attempt to slice her leg with his other pincer. It failed. She pulled her leg away and sent a spinning kick at the boy. Naruto raised both of his forearms to block and sent a kick of his own, though he quickly pulled his leg away and sent his other, perfectly feinted by his first leg. She raised her shin to block his leg and pushed the boy away using her katana, running back at him. The fight was filled with bright sparks. It unknowingly led them both far away from the office and off the edge. They fell onto a cage and continued their kenjutsu fight. Naruto was barely even able to defend her precise and sometimes even lax attacks, so he chose not to fight her in her comfort zone anymore. He jumped back twice on the massive cage, and when he landed he flipped through a few hand seals. Water release. Twisted serpents. He spat out a long, deep blue column of water at the woman. The jutsu spun within itself to form multiple snakes with drill-like mouths. The snakes dropped from Naruto's mouth and slithered to her. The teenage girl slashed a section off the iron cage and hurled it at Naruto.
The boy shot Tsusenban at the large projectile and the ninja wire with spider chemical properties stuck to it solidly. The boy spun around and hurled it back at her. The woman slashed the returned iron projectile apart and leapt over the snakes. Dashing to Naruto, the boy ran at her and made a crucial decision as he did so. Aoki's katana cut clean through his stomach and exited his back. Blood dribbled out of his nose slowly and he began to slowly slump against her. She ruffled his hair, still effortlessly holding him up in the air, and said, "You won't get a next time to get better, kid." The teenage girl might have been young for her age, but she was already a respected samurai in her own right. This respect though was wiped off by her fellow samurai in Iron Country when she had gone rogue. After killing the Iron Country leader's brother in a duel to the death, Naruto was Haichunin at best when he used his pincers to fight. "Don't need one," Naruto said lowly, in a hushed voice. A twisted smile slowly spread on his face, still lowered and blocked by his hair. "Whatcha say?" the 16-year-old girl said and leaned in a little. "I said," Naruto began, his smile now a full-blown grin. There was a low rumble in his chest, poisonous smog. His head snapped up and he breathed out a plume of smoke over her and him. The girl pulled away abruptly, unsheathing her katana from inside Naruto, and unconsciously took in a gulp of toxic air into her system. "You little," she began as her lungs began shutting down and her heartbeat began to slow down. Her katana clattered on the ground. "You tricked me." The plume of gas was still shrouding them. "I've been known to do that, yes," Naruto said as he swallowed a pill that reduced the pain her legendary sword had put him in. "And I also told you I don't fail." The teen was now trying and failing to muster up the energy to move forward, but her whole body remained unresponsive. She then fell forward. "I specially made this poison mix when I want to take home a prisoner back home alive." She was flat on her face and fading fast until Naruto pricked her cheek with his foot. A small senbon stuck out of the toe briefly before it slid back in. "You should be happy you have gotten my interest. Quite frankly, no one else has done that. You will make a great bodyguard." "I will never," she said in a weak voice. Now the pain she was in was like she was being strangled. No air was getting into her lungs, but air was leaving with each desperate pant. "Your honor demands it." "My honor died the day I killed Nafune. Then we can settle on you dying on the floor like a common street thug while I walk past you and capture your leader." A smaller puff of smoke within the thick plume of smoke came and another Naruto ran to the leader's office. "Scratch that. My clone can retrieve him while I watch you die here like a dog." The thick smoke was settling and Naruto took his time to sit on the ground with his legs crossed, watching her with rapt interest, even removing a notepad from his backpack and writing down whatever he saw her trying to do. He poked her head with his pen and she stirred up a little, her eyes hooded and tired. She whined quietly and whispered, "I don't wanna die." "Then you agree to come and work for me?" He could sense the more inquisitive Black Ops members moving towards the smoke that had obscured their vision. "I'll even pay you if that's what you want. Your skills with your blade are very impressive." "Money later, I want to live," she said breathily. He smirked at her reply. "You have your priorities straight. Good." He pricked her neck again, but this time with a syringe filled with a multicolored liquid. She sighed in relief as her lungs allowed passage of air through, but the thick smoke around them prevented her from being fully healed, or even allowing her to move her body. He sealed her and her sword into a storage seal before he unsealed a few white bones and scattered them on the ground. "Take cover." He dropped a low-powered explosive tag and leapt out of the smoke. The explosion wasn't large, but it shook the foundations of the ground. The blonde scientist didn't acknowledge the other Anbu operatives that were staring at him in shock. He merely dusted off his stealth uniform and marched off to where his clones were keeping the freed slaves contained. His mission was complete. Now he had other things to worry about. A month later. Ubari Miyoto shakily slid the keys to his door into the lock and with a sloppy turn of his wrist he unlocked the door. He shouldered it open and the first smell that hit him was the gentle aroma of freshly baked cinnamon buns. His stomach rumbled hungrily, which wasn't a surprise since he had only been drinking through the night. In his drunken days he didn't even remember that it was unusual for a person to bake well past midnight, or that his family was not meant to be back from their holiday in tea country. He followed his nose and licked his lips, pushing aside the single curtain that served as the door to the dining area. The place was bathed in darkness besides the head of the table where he saw a pair of hands idly tap the table.
A ruby red ring on the person's left pinky and a sky blue ring on his right middle finger. The lamp on the dining table illuminated the person's hands. His chin, his purple pinstripe suit, and showed that he had a wide-brimmed black hat on his head that cast a long shadow down to his mouth. Miyoto sniffed a little and squinted to get a better look at this person until the door to the kitchen was pushed open and a black-haired woman entered with a pan filled with cinnamon buns in her hand.
Aoki-chan was now clad in a more modest long-sleeved flowing white kimono that was cut at her calves to show long red stockings, a crimson red sash around her waist and tight black shorts. Her katana was leaning on the table besides the suit-wearing man. The 16-year-old rank female samurai smiled gently at the man and placed the baked rolls in front of him. "Thank you, Aoki-chan. My pleasure, Kitsugami-sama." The woman bowed and retrieved her katana, holding it in her iron grasp as she stood at attention behind the man that was apparently named Kitsugami, holding the handle of the lethally sharp blade in her right and ready to draw at a moment's notice.
Miyoto swayed on his feet drunkenly and leaned on the wall. "Who you?" he slurred. The mysterious man reached forward and took a roll, making sure to deeply inhale its luscious scent before taking a small bite of it with his white serrated teeth. "Take a seat, Miyoto-san," he offered, and when the man remained defiant he made a small gesture over his shoulder to Aoki-chan. The girl marched over to the man and shoved the man into a chair. "Give him some of you wonderful rolls too, Aoki-chan." His voice had a deep maturity to it that was very intimidating, mostly to those that weren't aware of who he was. "Yes sir, thank you sir," the girl said, bowing deeply in appreciation and rushing off to the kitchen to give the man some of her baked rolls. She gently dropped a plate in front of him. "You're too kind, I am starved," the man said as he basically inhaled the scorching hot rolls without even having the decency to blow on them. Aoki-chan though remained by his side with her hand gripping the handle of her katana. Kitsugami grunted and tapped his fingers on the table to shake some sugar particles off. He had already eaten too and he was ready to begin. "Do you remember who I am, Miyoto-san?" The man grumbled as he jammed a roll into his mouth. "I don't know, the mailman," he joked. Kitsugami apparently didn't find the humor in what he said. "I am the guy you owe 500,000 ryu to," Kitsugami said sharply as he slammed his hands on the table. This seemed to snap the man out of his semi-drunken daze. The color drained from his face and he attempted to leap out of his seat, but Aoki-chan grabbed his shoulder with her right hand and pushed back into his seat firmly, displaying strength that clearly didn't show on her body. "I swear, Kitsugami-sama, I'll have your money in a week. That's what you told me last week, and the week before that, and the week before that. I swear I can get the money this time," the man blubbered. I just need more time." "Do you think I am a fool, Miyoto-san?" the man said as he bit into a cinnamon roll. He snapped his fingers and the girl rushed back into the kitchen and brought a cup of pineapple juice back with her. "Thank you." He took a small sip and dropped the cup back on the table. Aoki-chan bowed again and returned to Miyoto's side. "Can you tell me, Miyoto-san, the secret behind a successful business?" The man shook under Aoki-chan's harsh glare and shook his head. "I run a multi-million ryu drug company, inching towards being a multi-billion ryu drug empire. And I have customers all over the elemental nations, from rock country to frigid country, from lightning country to tea country, from shady dealers to legal buyers, and this was after I began widespread supplying 2 years ago. Do you want to know how I got so high up there so quick?" The formerly drunken man lowered his head and nodded. "My products are all top quality. I have friends and connections in Konoha's criminal underworld. I give incentive to regular customers that buy from me, and lastly," he brought his clenched fist down on the table again, "I always close my deals. He motioned to himself and at Miyoto, "made a deal but you continually refuse to close it." He motioned for Aoki-chan and she stuck her katana sheath into her red sash. She then unsealed a thick book from her wrist. "You purchased 600 pounds of Indian hemp from boss and agreed that you would pay it all a month ago," she said in a soft, hypnotic voice. She snapped the book closed and sealed it back into her wrist, glaring daggers at Miyoto when he didn't answer, rather closing his eyes and staring at his cold cinnamon rolls. "Well, why haven't I gotten my money?" Kitsugami demanded. "You are the only person that owes me money this month and I hate that." Here Aoki-chan bared her teeth in a feral grin. The man winced and tried to inch away from her, but she shoved him back into his seat. I just ran into a rough patch recently. Do you love your family, Miyoto-san?" Kitsugami asked as he impatiently tapped the table. Miyoto's head snapped up and he looked horrified, more than anything. I hear T-Country's mountain lodges are good this year. The millionaire man trailed off ominously. It was obvious this rich man knew where Miyoto's family was having their vacation. You leave my family alone. The man snarled and stood up abruptly, but he was again shoved down by Aoki-chan. The girl snorted and shook her head. Are you presuming? Kitsugami said as he stood up smoothly, walking to the man on the opposite side of the table. You can make any demands. He put both of his hands on Miyoto's shoulders, to me. The man lowered his head again. I am sorry, ha. You're not sorry, not yet. He stabbed a needle into Miyoto's shoulder and injected a thick green liquid into the man's system. Kitsugami used both of his hands to clamp Miyoto's mouth shut when it opened to scream in pain. There was no visible sign that he was in turmoil, but inside him his organs were cooking in the heat. Before it subsided 2 minutes after it started. I cooked this up myself. Venom from a desert duster mixed carefully with venom from a devil's spinster and left in the cool night air for a whole night. I call it my chill pill. He chuckled at his own small joke. Miyoto was sweating buckets after the poison had briefly subsided. The needle was still jammed into his shoulder, and when he attempted to take it out he was viciously slapped across the face by Aoki-chan. He whimpered and small drops of tears fell from his eyes. I really want to kill you, Miyoto-san, but I also really want my money. He pushed a little of the venom into the man and watched in twisted satisfaction as a muffled scream blasted out of Miyoto's lungs. I need a date, Miyoto-san. Give me a date. Place please. The suit-wearing man squeezed some more venom in. That's not what I want to hear. The hair on the Miyoto's head began to fall off in small clumps. Th 3 days, Miyoto said with a shaky, weak voice. Ple please gimme 3 days. And if you don't give me my money then, kill me, but please, leave my family out of this. I've got a better idea. If you fail me just use your family as my new test subjects. It's a win-win for me, don't you think, Aoki-chan? The girl grinned and bowed her head. Hi, Kitsugami-sama. 3 days, Kitsugami said with finality and left through the front door with Aoki-chan protectively flanking him from behind. As he and his bodyguard stepped into a shadowy alleyway, he took off his wide-brimmed hat and ran his fingers through his blonde hair. His hanged black eyes glowed at Aoki-chan. Wasn't that fun, Aoki-chan? The girl genuinely nodded. Hi, it was, Naruto-sama. There were a lot of things that could happen in 8 years if the first 2 years were ignored by authorities. Starting up operations that Ashitori Orochimaru had stopped was very easy. Painfully easy, and this time the quality of his products also increased. With the increase in customers there was an increase in contacts. And with that came an increase in profit that was fully given back to Naruto in crisp notes sealed into small squares of paper stashed into briefcases he was storing in a room in his warehouse. The boy had gone from passing samples of his products under the table to the drug lords he was gambling with to using the drug samples to gamble. Then when the drug lords had gotten a taste of his illegal products, there had been a massive demand for it. At that point Naruto began producing legal, hospital-grade drugs for hospitals and clinics if they too demanded for it. He now had small pockets of storehouses all over Fire Country, Mountain Country, Tea Country and Snow Country that sold his products in big shipments to buyers. Access to these warehouses was restricted to only those that knew the password of the week. The buildings were shrouded in 6B rank illusions and only permitted a person that had the password only after the first try. This only limited legal buys to going through Naruto's drug lord contacts that sent underlings to buy the products and sell it to the hospitals or clinics. It was all a well-connected network based on secrecy. He had hundreds of people that worked under him in these warehouses. These warehouses supplied his drugs to smaller pockets of customers who also sold these to even smaller pockets of people. Naruto was sure that just an hour ago he had made another 1,000 ryu in sales. His business was constantly expanding and evolving, always one step ahead of government officials because, quite frankly, he had loyal customers in the government of each country. His shipments always began with 12.5 massive storage scrolls filled to the very brim with a variety of drugs, legal and illegal, organized perfectly based on who gets what and what goes where, and that large scroll was sealed into a smaller scroll he sealed into his left palm. This was made even easier with his shadow clones keeping up production. He had a single body switch seal placed in the back of a clothes shop. Akichi's deluxe fashion line, where he was already in his Kitsugami disguise.
He would then walk to a brothel where at the very back popular people in the underworld were usually found making and breaking deals. It was a place where violence was punished by banishment and killing was punished with death. The brothel was the focal point of Konoha's criminal underworld, and without this focal point great underworld dealers were like sheep away from their flock.
The legal authorities would swarm on them faster than they could say oof. Gaining the trust of the dealers was not a problem. Naruto always had a way with words and an even greater flair for acting. Most weren't aware that the criminal underworld could be so methodical, organized, or even professional in their dealing. Naruto had a first-hand view of just how thorough they could be when they wanted to. This was just like his picture and his real name. Uzumaki Naruto was the main contact point for any messages that wanted to get to Kitsugami, whether it was his money or secret messages that must reach Kitsugami. The Hokage didn't know his connection to Kitsugami, but even still he would have to be even more careful. It was a reason he didn't have a bank account to store his stacks and stacks of Ryu notes. He was never sure when he would be caught and would be forced to run, but he would be prepared for that day. Uzumaki Naruto, in the criminal underworld, was regarded as Kitsugami Gumo's chief advisor, head of day-to-day activities in Kitsugami Drug Company and surrogate brother to the drug magnate, though this fact was only made aware to two people. The head matron of the brothel. The meetings were held, and to an employee that he gave regular supplies to so that they would be shared among his warehouses, and who he in turn collected hefty amounts of money from the warehouse branches. If either died, the secret would be passed on to another trusted member of the criminal underworld. From there his growing drug empire expanded, making the boy the richest drug producer in the entire elemental nations. It was a shame that the slave ring he had busted a month ago was destroyed. They were good customers for his products, not the only ones but good enough. Their destruction didn't slow down his production or even delayed the salary for his loyal workers, not even in the least. The Konoha criminal underworld was built on centuries of tradition. Blood and sacrifice. Every criminal act from pickpocketing and genocide had head monitors that regulated them. So as not to bring attention to the underworld, admission in and out this society was very easy, but gaining enough trust and reliability to be given the red ring of a Konoha baron was not easy. Naruto, as Kitsugami, had to spread his weight around and show the other barons that his products were much higher than legitimate. Trust came when he had used his limited connections to bail out the crime lord from the Uchiha police detainment after he had been accused of murdering a civilian family in cold blood. The crime lord was framed. The meeting place, or headquarters, for these Konoha barons, which Naruto was a member, was in the brothel located in a seedy section of the red light district. There was no leader among the barons, but everyone was equal and with the same power as the other. Being a baron was the highest post given to those that the underworld could rely on without question, and did things for the other barons that would get his or her name into circulation. In the brothel, arguments were only verbal, if any, but the moment it became physical, the person would be indefinitely suspended from the brothel. Like a wolf cast from his pack, most of the normal members of the underworld didn't know that the prostitutes that served there were also highly trained assassins that were commanded by the head matron until it was too late. Their job was to keep all the members of the organization in check. They also acted as hit men, or better yet hit women, to those that requested their services. Konoha's criminal underworld didn't have a specific location, but it had been acknowledged that each section of criminal activity had a meeting place and a head of the section. Head of these sections were called monitors. These heads usually met up with other heads to discuss matters. Konoha's underworld was deeply rooted in the elemental nations, so much so that it was connected to every other underworld in the elemental nations. Even the ones in Iwagakure and Kumogakure. Meetings with barons from these different places happened every 3 months. Usually in an underwater cave near Waterfall Village. Naruto merely sent a highly powered shadow clone to attend for him. These meetings were what helped him in setting up more shops all over and increased his clientele. For any experimental drug he received, he was given free rein to test them out on test human subjects these barons produced. He was careful to not bring any human test subject to his laboratory unless it couldn't be helped. There were 5 barons in Konoha, 8 in Iwa, 3 in Kumo, none since the war in Iwa, and 4 from Suna, 20 in total. Naruto and his loyal bodyguards slipped into the back room of the clothes shop and he switched first. Then Aoki-chan followed after quickly. They then switched into his laboratory to begin work on a new project he was working on. Somewhere in the forests at the edge of Lightning Country, bushes rustled and burst apart as a panting waterfall Junin ran through. The man wore a short-sleeved white shirt under his blue Junin flak jacket and black pants. There was also a distinct slash across the waterfall symbol on his hitate. The hysterical man looked around suspiciously but didn't slow down. He had been on the run for 2 whole weeks now from a Konoha ninja team that had been after his bounty.
He licked his dry lips and pushed aside some shrubs, cursing himself for attempting to even steal from Hidden Leaf. Kumogakure may provide the sanctuary he direly needed. He blindly threw the last of his shuriken at the people that were chasing him, but as he looked back he caught 2 extra thin, silver-glinting ninja wire spooled through 2 senbon jammed into trees at his right and left. He quickly passed the trees but 2 feet smashed into the back of his head before he could go too far.
The attacker had used the elastic wire as a catapult, and as the waterfall shinobi sailed through the air he shot 2 more senbon with wires at him to wrap around him and pull him back.
Just before the missing ninja could touch the ground, his attacker leapt on his airborne body and speed wrapped him in elastic but iron-strong ninja wire, eerily like a spider. When the man hit the ground heavily, with the added weight, the person, wearing a pair of black goggles that the edges shone a faint red, breathed green smoke into his face. He was out faster than he thought.
Another person leapt down beside the first attacker. This person was as pale as the moon with purple hair and wearing standard Junin uniform. There was also a lethally sharp katana sheathed on her back. The first attacker stood up and looked down at the man he had captured, his blood-red eyes blank behind his goggles from any sort of care. Confirm target. Target already confirmed. Yugo Senpai, Naruto said as he ripped the mon's left sleeves, showing off 3 fang tattoos. Zen Yoruko, member of the 3 Fangs cult. Naruto's uniform and features were not that different from how he began. Except he now wore a Junin flak jacket and his black gloves were now ruby red. His skin had gotten paler, as pale as Yugo, and he had 4 dots over his eyebrows, 2 over each, that were hidden by his overhanging blonde bangs, and 2 dots on the bridge of his nose under his eyes. His blonde hair was styled so that it covered his forehead but didn't hinder his sight. Yugo smiled gently at the 13-year-old special Junin and refrained from patting his shoulder, knowing that the boy still hated being touched without his permission. Good job, Naruto-kun. The boy effortlessly hefted the bigger man on his shoulder. Let's head back to Konoha. The Chunin exam starts in a week and I don't want to miss anything. If we run fast enough we can make it. Yugo nodded and they ran full tilt back to Konoha. The Anbu captain had temporarily dropped her post as Anbu operative so she could be a regular Junin again. The post was always open for her but she had said she wouldn't return until Naruto was a full Junin. Naruto had been given his Tokubetsu Junin rank when he had returned to Konoha. The Sandaime wasn't happy about him succeeding without any help, but he had pulled back and handed the boy his Junin flak jacket. With the knowledge that Naruto would still have a supervisor he would have to answer to and would have to take at least 1 mission every month with. Yugo Uzuki was his supervisor just like Kurenai Yuhi was Mitarashi Anko's supervisor. The Sandaime though had read reports of Naruto using poison bombs and being able to breathe out toxic poisons. This led the man to investigate Naruto further on how he was able to do this. Naruto had to allow some ninja into his home to see a makeshift lab set where he mixed chemicals for his poison bombs. This temporarily assuaged the old Kage's curiosity and allowed Naruto to perform his missions without any hindrance. Sadly though he also had to make the Hokage and his supervisor aware of his Spider Clan summoning. When they found it suspicious he had taken a month-long mission but returned 3 months later. Also saying that he used the time to train with Kyuubi's chakra. During that time he had hidden in his laboratory and injected himself with Queen Spider's blood. He was proven right when he said it would hurt. Painkillers didn't work but a full day of pain later was replaced by otherworldly clarity, strength, speed and flexibility. He was also now able to control any species of spiders with a mental command. He could stick to surfaces without chakra. He could run faster than most Junin, and these were the only things he wanted to reveal. Naruto was now acclaimed among his Junin peers as a master of infiltration, espionage, poison, trapping, capture and retrieval. So far there was no mission that centered on these aspects that Naruto couldn't complete. His only known rival in a few of these aspects was the Toad Sage, Jiraiya. The man had declared an unofficial war against the 13-year-old boy on who was the best spy, but since Jiraiya had an earlier start than Naruto he was winning. The boy didn't care though. When they got back to Konoha and dropped off the missing ninja in T&I they parted ways. There were more foreign ninja in the village now and the young Tokubetsu Junin walked around, making sure to wear his hoodie but with it fully unzipped so all could see his Junin flak jacket, and waved to the shinobi and civilians he passed. Months of seeing Naruto dressed like that had made them more accustomed to him. His reputation looked good so far. The hair on his neck stood on end and his head turned to an alleyway where he sensed the problem. He walked over and sighed tiredly when he saw what was happening. "Please, just leave him alone," Sakura yelled to Kankuro, who had the Sandame's grandson, Sarutobi Konohamaru, off his feet and was about to punch his face. "The little shit should apologize first," Kankuro growled. "You're gonna get us in trouble, Kankuro, just leave the kid alone," Tamari said with an idle flick of her blonde hair. "I already said I was sorry," Konohamaru yelled, but Kankuro shook the boy violently. "Say it like you mean it," Kankuro growled, his fist now twitching to give the boy a blow. "I think that's enough, Suna Shinobi," Naruto called from the entrance of the alley. He walked forward slowly with his hands in his pockets. "Drop the kid and keep moving." Naruto-san," Sakura said quietly and sent a shaky smile when Naruto smiled at her. The taller boy ruffled her pink hair silently and kept walking to the two Suna ninjas. "And who do you think you are?" Kankuro said. Naruto stopped in front of the boy and replied, "A foreign shinobi attacking a civilian, especially a child, in his own village is considered a crime, punishable by indefinite expulsion from the shinobi system in your hidden village. And this is considering the fact that Suna is allied to Konoha. Are you aware of this?" Kankuro blubbered. "I thought so." The sand puppet master hastily dropped Konohamaru and the boy hid behind the tall blonde boy. He stuck out his tongue at Kankuro while his two friends rushed and also took their places behind Naruto. "I'll just be on my way now," Naruto said with a smile as he turned around, ushering the three academy students out of the alley until he felt a small burst of chakra in the air and a sand shunshin spin behind him. He still kept his back to the sand siblings. "Go home, kids," he said to the three, and they thanked him as they ran away. "And get down from there, Sasuke," he said as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. The Uchiha leapt down from the branch he was standing on with a distasteful scowl on his face. "You, the one with the goggles," a red-haired boy said after the sand shunshin had settled. "My name is Naruto," the blonde said over his shoulder. "My name is Sabaku no Gaara and I want to know if you will be in the Chunin exams." "Nope, I am a Tokubetsu Junin," Naruto said as he turned to the sand siblings, pointing at his flak jacket hidden under his hoodie, "but good luck anyway." "It's a pity, I would have wanted to crush you with my sand," Gaara said blankly. Naruto just barely suppressed the feral grin that wanted to spread on his face. Sure." He turned around and began walking away. "I advise you three to stay out of trouble. That was the Sandame's grandson you were about to punch, puppet master." "How did he know I use puppets?" Kankuro muttered. Tamari furrowed her eyebrows at the blonde boy that was walking away before she looked at her younger red-haired brother, who was glaring harsh death at Naruto. She was too late to say anything before Gaara sent a wave of sand at Naruto. Sasuke and Sakura leapt aside and stuck to the walls. "Naruto-san!" Sakura yelled. The hairs on Naruto's neck stood up again and he ran up the wall to his right. Flipped off, and as he was in the air he removed 4 white marbles from his shuriken pouch and threw it at the wave of sand. The tremendous wave of sand ate the marbles and soon after spider webs of ice cracked on its surface and overwhelmed it. Freezing the sand over with thick ice, Naruto landed on the surface and ran at high Junin speed at Gaara, who was frantically trying to regain control of his sand until Naruto sent a jaw-shattering elbow strike to his face. The sand on the boy's jaw held strong until Naruto whipped out a purple goo oozing senbon and slashed it across Gaara's stomach. Much too quickly for the other boy to anticipate before a brutal knee met the same place, air blasted out of the red-haired boy's mouth after this and he crumbled to his knees. Naruto used this chance to bring down his heel in an axe kick to the back of Gaara's head. The downed boy made an attempt to move, but Naruto had already speed-wrapped him in tough ninja wire. This happened in a whirlwind of activity much too fast for the genin to keep track of. Naruto tutted and shook his head, ignoring Tamari, who was ready with her battle fan. "To think I actually thought you were cool." He grabbed the back of the ninja wire binding Gaara and hefted the dazed boy to his feet. "You're lucky I am in a good mood today, or else I would have reported you to the Hokage." He pulled a single wire from the millions that wrapped Gaara and it immediately came undone and was sucked into Naruto's senbon launchers. "And stand down, girl," he ordered, and Tamari hesitantly dropped her guard. "Good, now listen here, Sabaku no Gaara," he said, and he glared at the red-haired boy, who flinched slightly and avoided looking back. "I am leaving now. If you attack me again, Kage's son or not, I will end you."
He turned around and smashed his fist on the ice holding Gaara's sand in place, and it shattered on contact.
The sand fell down limply on the ground and slithered back into Gaara's gourd. Same goes for both of you. With that he turned around. Sakura leapt down beside him and ducked her head when he looked at her. Thank you for helping, Naruto-san. The boy gave her a friendly smile. It was nothing. Where's the other member of your team? He asked, walking with Sakura and Sasuke slinking behind them cautiously. You mean Sai? I don't know what he does in his free time, Sakura shrugged. Either way, good luck in the exams, you too Sasuke-san. The Uchiha grunted. Whatever. The Junin was about to say something else but Sakura spoke up first. Naruto-san, you're a Junin, right? Naruto quirked up an eyebrow at her question and said, a Tokubetsu Junin but a Junin nonetheless. Why do you ask? Do you think we're ready for the Chunin exams? You should ask yourself that question. Do you think you're ready for the exams? The pink-haired girl shrugged tiredly. I don't know. Naruto motioned for her to go on. They were now slowly walking past small shops in the merchants district. Kakashi-sensei says we're ready, but I don't think so. We almost got our hands handed to us if sensei wasn't there in our first rank mission. That's the reason he was there in the first place, to show you the ropes so you'll be more prepared when you start going on missions on your own. It was a humbling experience to Team 7 after their first rank. They had been exposed to a small dose of fear in the form of the Demon of the Mist. Momochi Zabuza, and the member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist had schooled them on what it meant to be shinobi. Sakura would admit without shame that she was the least prepared among her teammates since she had spent most of her time prepping her makeup instead of running inventory on her weapons. And after the mission the first thing she had requested was extra training from Kakashi. The man had helped her find her passion in medical ninjutsu from there, saying that her small chakra capacity allowed her to have a great amount of control over it. Sasuke too focused on not being surprised again, using his Sharingan whenever he was training. Sakura rubbed her arms with her hands and her eyes drooped. You know how I was in the academy. I was a good student but I am a horrible ninja. Naruto was silent for a moment. What are you good at? I know a little on medical ninjutsu and I can use genjutsu, mostly C rank. Then that's good. What I know about the Chunin exams is that they evaluate the genin on planning, cunning and skills. You don't need to win to be promoted. You don't think we can win? Sasuke interrupted. Naruto shook his head. I didn't say that. I mean that you put in a good showing for the crowd and for the Hokage. That's what matters. The argument died on Sasuke's tongue and he stuffed his hands in his pockets. Yeah, okay. Win or lose you guys and the other teams will do great, I am sure of it. Sakura gave Naruto a small, shaky smile and Sasuke rolled his eyes. Thank you, Naruto-san. He waved it away and gave them thumbs up. I need to go now. There's a Junin meeting in the Hokage's office in 5 minutes. I'll see you guys later. He waved over his shoulder but thin arms wrapped around his stomach and a head settled between his shoulder blades. His hands clenched unconsciously and his lips twitched downwards but he quickly covered it with a smile. Only Sasuke caught his hands and the Uchiha raised a curious eyebrow, watching as Naruto painfully unclenched his fists but they were now more like claws. I mean it Naruto, thank you. Naruto turned around in the girl's arms and patted her back before he gently pushed her off, making sure not to seem rude. No problem, now I really need to get to the Hokage's office. He turned around and put his hands into his pockets. His hood was already up so a shadow was cast to his nose. The 2 genin watched the Tokubetsu Junin walk off through the crowd of merchants to the cage's tower until Sasuke stood beside Sakura and asked, what was that about? A small smile played on the pink-haired girl's lips as she answered, nothing you should worry about, see you tomorrow. She waved and sped off towards her house, making Sasuke wonder what had gotten into her. She hadn't asked him for a date. At the Hokage's office Naruto politely knocked on the door and poked his head inside, seeing that all the other active Konoha Junin and special Junin were already there. Glad to see you could join us, Naruto, Hiruzen said as he blew out some smoke from the corner of his lips. I was held up somewhere, the boy said as he shuffled in. The other Junin weren't that much taller than him but he was still the youngest in the room. Yugo, not in her Anbu mask, called him over to her side of the room, the window, and he sat down on the edge. All right, I just want to tell you all what you'll be doing in the exams, the Sandaime said and he handed small files to the Junin, making sure to call their names. I've already organized the Chunin on what they will be doing. Kakashi, Guy, Kurenai and Asuma. You four will be sealed into the earth and heaven scrolls. Until you are properly unsealed, don't worry about air, food or water. Jiraiya personally designed these seals. He had all those things accounted for. Hi, Hokage-sama, the four Junin said. When you are unsealed you will stay with your teams in the competitors' stand. Make sure to cheer them on, the old man said with a twinkle in his eyes. The four Junin nodded. Anko and Naruto. You two will be in charge of the security in the Forest of Death. Any external interruption should be contained and reported, understood? Hi, Hokage-sama, the two said. Naruto was idly twirling a 6-inch-long senbon with his fingers and Anko was leaning on the wall beside him, sucking on a dango stick. The snake summoner even sent a 2-fingered salute as she used her other hand to hold the mission specs file open. Yugo, Hayate and Genma, you two will be in charge of security before and after the second test. Mostly at night, Naruto, since you are best at combat in the dark you will be joining them. The three Junin read through what they were supposed to focus on. Any suspicious behavior from the foreign ninja or any unregistered person should be contained and reported. The Anbu will provide support if things go south. Use deadly force if it can't be helped. He blew out more smoke from his mouth, dismissed. The Junin filed out of the office quietly. Naruto waved to his supervisor and her boyfriend,
Genma, as they made their way home. As he walked to his own, his goggle-protected eyes, that were in turn hidden under his hood, kept a careful watch on those that passed him. Not want to be robbed of anything, on instinct his left hand reached out and gave a hidden low five to a spectacle-wearing, silver-haired man, and a small paper square that had been passed to him slipped into his sleeve. Just before the silver-haired man could fully pass he stopped, leaned in and whispered,
Mistress sends her love. The blond boy nodded in acknowledgement and replied, Tell her I send mine too. A smile etched onto the mon's face. She will be very happy to hear that. Naruto smiled back slightly. How is she? She is well. Good to hear. The low grumbling in the red light district muffled their voices. Both parted ways. It had been a long while since Naruto had heard from Orochimaru of the Sannin, the last time being when the woman had sent him money when he had just graduated from the academy. When Naruto pushed open his front door and used his foot to close it he unsealed the letter in the small paper square. It was a short one. I'll be in the Forest of Death running an errand. Meet me there if you can. Orochimaru of the Sannin. P.S. If you can't make it I'll see you at your place. Naruto screwed his lips to the side and put the letter into his pocket. He was sure that he loved his godmother, like family. She was the first one to look out for his well-being and she had set him on where he should go in life. He owed a lot to her and it would make his day to finally meet her in person. The problem lay on how he would be able to excuse himself from his post in the CCTV room while avoiding the cameras in the forest. His answer came the next day when he was in the security camera room with Anko, whiling away the time by commanding a tiny spider summons to run over his hand. His eyes watched the tiny spider skitter on his hand in frenzy until the door burst open and a Chunin ran in, panting like a racehorse. Anko sat up, formerly reading a magazine, and glared at the Chunin. What is it? We have a problem, Sector 7. What problem? Naruto said, his eyes still fixed on the spider he was controlling. I can't explain. You need to come. Let's go, Naruto said as he stood up. The Chunin nodded and hurried out of the room. Anko followed after the young blonde. The scene they walked in was horrifying to anyone that wasn't used to seeing even more horrific things. There was a corpse strewn across the ground and it looked like a female with her face ripped off. All the blood in her body had been drained and she didn't have any finger bones. Naruto knelt on one knee and used his pointer and middle finger to turn her head from left to right. It looked fresh. There weren't any worms in her and the bugs looked like they had made their nest recently. He furrowed his eyebrow and turned to Anko. But she was staring at the dead woman with wide eyes. Know who did this, Anko? I can give a guess, you three. She pointed to the three Chunin that had found the woman. Go tell the Hokage. Well, go into the forest and handle the person that did this. Their subordinates saluted and ran off to do what she had ordered. It was Orochimaru. Are you certain? She got off her knees and began to run to the Forest of Death. Yes. Naruto caught up with her and they both disappeared in the forest. The boy could feel a small tingle spread in his stomach as he followed his nose to where the scent of snakes and blood was strongest. He walked in on the scene of an ink tiger being punched back into ink and Orochimaru holding up an unconscious Sakura by her neck. Pathetic. The Sannin hissed and threw the girl across the clearing to a tree, but Naruto shot a net from his left launcher and a senbon above her that caught her and hung her on a tree. "You're disturbing my hunt," the pale Sannin hissed and turned around, barely keeping her eyes from widening on who she saw. "Ah, Anko-chan and Naruto-kun, what a surprise. I am finally going to kill you, sensei," Anko snarled. "Oh, you think so, huh? Then come at me." She made a come-hither motion with her right hand, and just as Anko sped over, the Sannin activated her cursed seal, sending the crazy snake lady into mind-numbing pain before she finally passed out. "You were always too brash, Anko-chan, and too slow," Orochimaru said as she shook her head, her small, black lipstick-covered lips screwed to the side in irritation. The Sannin though had to lean back when Naruto seemingly appeared out of nowhere and sent a punch to her face. When she dodged the blow, she was again surprised that Naruto merely used the punch to hide a savage left heel kick that effectively met her face with a horrifying crack. The woman then melted into a mud puddle. Naruto looked around carefully. He raised his right leg and used the sole of his foot to deflect a thrown kunai, kicking the weapon up and sending it back with a spinning kick. Orochimaru ran out of the place the weapon had disappeared to with a sickening grin on her face and a faint purple bruise on her cheek where Naruto had kicked her. The taijutsu fight between them could be considered legendary. They both sent snap kicks that met in synchronized drilling blows that countered the other. Naruto slipped behind the woman and savagely hacked at her neck, but she twisted away from him. "Hidden shadow snakes," the woman hissed, and out of her long sleeves multiple white snakes shot out at Naruto. The boy opened his palm and returned fire by saying, "Hidden shadow spiders." Pitch black spiders that were about as large as his fingers erupted out of his sleeves and countered the Sannin's attack perfectly. Orochimaru abruptly cancelled her jutsu and spat out the kusanagi at Naruto, easily cutting through the throngs of lethal spiders. The boy's eyes widened a little and he just barely leaned away from the legendary sword, feeling the breeze just waft past his nose. This allowed an opening for Orochimaru to erupt out of the ground and bring down her fist on his head. But the blow never connected. The tall woman, probably as tall as Naruto, stood frozen with her fist hovering over his blonde head. She stared at him and he stared back. The two members of Team 7 that were conscious watched in fascination as the woman slowly dropped her hand and her shoulder sagged. She looked away and murmured, "I can't hit you, I just can't." She said it so quietly that only Naruto could hear her. "You look like him so much." He could see the defeat in her eyes as she said this, the way her heart broke when she spared him a fleeting smile. Naruto stayed in his brace for impact stance, but his guard slowly dropped. "There are cameras everywhere," he whispered. "Then do what you have to do, Naruto-kun," she shrugged. "I promise I won't mind. I still want to talk to you. I want to know you, Orochimaru Ba-chan," Naruto said, unconsciously calling her grandma. The pale white woman chuckled under her breath, sounding like a low menacing hiss. "You did not just call me grandma." I am sorry," Naruto said and his eyes lowered. "It's just that, you're the first to care about me. It'd be great if I got to know you and you got to know me." "Why no?" He was glad that the cameras didn't have audio, but he was worried if the two genin hiding would hear him. A large, sincere smile stretched on the snake Sannin's face. "Your place tonight then, and I am sorry about this." About the air rushed out of his mouth as the rogue Sannin impaled him with a kunai. "I am so sorry, Naruto-kun," she muttered as she slowly lowered the boy to the ground. "I made sure none of your major organs were hit." A little blood gurgled out of his mouth, but he still smiled at her. "It'll be fine. Go." She nodded and was about to blur into the forest, but she stopped for a moment, indecision on her face, before she finally made her decision and kissed Naruto on his forehead. For once the boy didn't flinch at the contact. He just closed his eyes and savored the short, loving contact. "I'll see you later, okay?" He slowly nodded with his eyes still shut and he felt her presence leave the area. He put his right hand over the knife wound, making sure to gently pull out the knife before he did. He staggered to his feet and blinked when he saw the two male genin staring at him. Then he remembered that the snake Sannin had on black makeup, which included black lipstick. He frantically rubbed the lipstick stain on his forehead and sat down heavily beside a tree. "You guys don't need to hide anymore, she's gone." He grunted as he carefully used his left hand to reach into his kunai pouch and pulled out a small sachet. He shakily tore it open with his teeth and sprinkled a red powder over the wound. He sighed when the pain subsided the skin and began to knit back together. "You almost had her. Why did you stop?" Sai said as he stood in front of Naruto with his arms crossed. She's a Sannin. I don't think it's possible to almost have her. Naruto snapped as he put his right hand over the knife wound. Feeling the pain reduced to a dull throb, set up camp for the night.
It'll be out of your hair in 30 minutes, he grunted to his feet and hefted Anko up bridal style, gently laying her under the tree he formerly sat under. He whipped out a moist white handkerchief and placed it on the cursed seal. The heat that was emanating off the seal slowly reduced, and 10 minutes later the snake summoner's eyes flickered open. Her pupil-less eyes saw Naruto sitting next to her reading a book on the human respiratory system. He didn't look at her before he spoke up.
Can you walk? The woman whined under her breath and struggled to sit up, but it was to no avail. No, everything hurts. What happened? We got our asses handed to us is what happened, Naruto replied sharply, barely keeping his hands from squeezing the book her was reading. Fucking fantastic, Anko said under her breath. Sasuke and Sai observed the two special Junin over the fire. Sakura was still out cold, lying under some blankets near the fire. It was past sunset and they were preparing some meat on the fire. Naruto had already fully healed and was humoring himself by reading a book while he waited for his fellow Junin to wake up. The woman realized with a start that the boy had covered her up with a red blanket. Probably to conserve some moral decency, he thought Anko had. She snorted and weakly tried to sit up, but again she failed. The only sounds in the small clearing were the faint crackling of the fire and the soft chirps the crickets were making. The spider summoner licked his pointer finger and turned a page in his book. The silence was solemn until all of their eyes flickered to Sakura when she groaned, sitting up slowly as she finally woke up. Naruto went back to reading his book, but this time he idly threw a pill into Anko's mouth that when she bit into it some of her energy returned to her. He tossed 3 more to the genin team and they gratefully bit into it. Chakra replenishing pills I cooked up in my lab, he mumbled, and the woman nodded her head. Knowledge of Naruto's lab was not secret anymore. Can you walk now? She got to her feet, but her legs shook violently, forcing her to slump against a tree and slid to a sitting position. Fuck it all, she groaned in frustration. We need to go and report what happened to the Sandame, Naruto said to her as he snapped the book closed. He was all business as he stood up and looked down on the woman. I'll carry you. Like hell you will, she snarled. Right now I don't care what you think. It's either I carry you out of here or I leave you in the hands of these genin. Helpless and barely able to stand. The woman glared up at him, a vain effort to intimidate him, until she sighed and nodded. Fine, but if you do anything stupid. She left the threat hanging in the air and the boy shrugged as he summoned a clone to carry her bridal style. The real Naruto gave the 3 genin a 2-fingered salute and said, "Stay out of trouble." He was about to run out until he added as an afterthought, "There is a genin team that's been watching us for 10 minutes now, maybe waiting for me and Anko to leave." "Why are you telling us? Isn't it cheating?" Sasuke asked. "It is, just like giving you those pills is cheating," Naruto answered frankly. "You sensed them before, right, Sai?" he said after thinking up the boy's name. "I am not a censor, but I knew they were there. Regardless, you guys are in for a fight." As he stepped into the forest team, Dosu struck. Naruto had already dropped Anko off in the hospital wing and was now sitting in front of the Hokage. A video playing on his fight with Orochimaru on loop. Hiruzen was sitting on his desk in the office in the Chunin exam stadium, watching Naruto's expression for anything akin to guilt. There was no audio for them to hear the conversation and Naruto had made sure to muffle his lips so that they wouldn't be read. The Hokage clicked the pause button when Orochimaru had stabbed him in his stomach, using deadly speed to even get that close to him. Naruto's eyes bugged out and his cheeks puffed up with air as the Sannin winced at what she had done. Hiruzen silently dropped the remote on his desk and propped his elbows on the desk, his chin on his thumbs and his fingers just under his eyes that stared at Naruto fixedly. "Are you ready to give me an explanation?" The blonde boy raised an eyebrow and replied, "About what?" "Why you held back." She held back too. Hiruzen sighed tiredly and rubbed his eyes. "You had every chance to finish her off, but you didn't take it. I know as a fact you have a high control over your spider summons, and you can easily regenerate from that stab wound. Why did you let her go?" Naruto stayed silent and the old man sighed again. "I've told you, Naruto, Orochimaru is nothing but trouble. She will use you and dump you like scum. She was the first person to give 2 shits about me, Hokage-sama." She cared when no one did, even though she couldn't visit me personally. Is this what this is about? She gave you some goggles and a scroll on spiders.
She gave them to me when I was in desperate need of them. I was so young, but I already thought that my life would not go anywhere. Orochimaru proved me wrong. I am not sorry for feeling some form of familial love for her. Naruto stood up abruptly. I'll be leaving now. I have a night shift to prepare for. He left the office, ignoring when Yugao tried to call for him after hearing what he had said. Behind his back the Sandaime Hokage nodded for a small ambush squad to tail him. Losing the ANBU was child's play for Naruto. As he walked into the red light district, he walked into a clothing shop, the one he uses to switch to his apartment, and switched to his apartment. As his feet touched down on the ground, he was immediately assaulted with kisses to his face and a tight hug from the snake Sanin herself. His face reddened in embarrassment, but he didn't push her away. His arms slowly, shakily reached around her waist and hugged her back.
She pulled her head back and looked at his face carefully.
A happy grin played on her lips. I've waited so long for this day. She bit her bottom lip and hugged him tightly again before she led him to the living room, where he found Aoki-chan standing at attention with her right hand on her katana handle for a quick draw, staring at the silver-haired man that had slipped him the note. The black-haired samurai looked at him quickly with her eyes, then back to the medic, who was sitting on a chair with an amused expression on his face.
Stand down, Aoki-chan, he's with her. The girl bowed and removed her hand from the handle. Orochimaru looked at her, then back to Naruto. She was here when I came in. You told her I was your godmother. She stated this. She's a very good friend of mine. She had to know. Naruto replied as he ushered the paper pale snake summoner to sit down on a chair. Aoki shuffled to Naruto quietly and Naruto leaned in and whispered, "Anything to eat?" "Hi, there's some pork and chicken flavored rice in the fridge. I could warm it up if you want." "Please, if you don't mind. Oh, and make some green tea for us, thank you," he said gratefully, and she went to do what he had asked.
"She's very polite," Orochimaru said as she crossed her legs. She patted the seat beside her for Naruto to sit down on, and the boy did so. "Now let's catch up. I want to hear what you've been up to all these years."
"Same goes for you," Naruto said, and he felt a small bubbling feeling in his gut that felt like when he was about to make a major breakthrough in his experiments. The woman smiled gently and put her right hand on his own that were clenched on his knees. "I know. I owe you that and much, much more." Naruto's eyes flickered to Kabuto and the woman waved for him to give them some privacy.
This was probably the first time a living, breathing human being ever made him excited to talk to. He spoke with Orochimaru about everything that had happened in his life and all he had discovered, even on his drug empire and his disguise as Kitsugami Gumo. This shocked Orochimaru because she had been buying some drugs from the Kitsugami Drug Company for a long while, even going as far as showing Naruto a box of painkiller tablets with his logo at the top.
A skeletal spider head with 9 legs around it. He had confided in her that the Hokage had launched a top-secret investigation on his corporation when the drugs in the hospital had started purchasing from him had mistakenly come up during an inventory check. They didn't have anything solid on Kitsugami yet, but he suspected that they would soon infiltrate the criminal underworld. Naruto spoke with her on the genetically altered spider blood, his system that had given him a higher control over the Kyuubi chakra. There was some nature chakra in his chakra network that equalized the Kyuubi's chakra and balanced out his own chakra. This nature chakra didn't negatively react to him because he was now technically part spider. They shared a cup of tea and some pork and chicken flavored rice as Orochimaru began regaling tales of her travels all over the elemental nations and of all the experiments she had conducted.
Telling him that she had created an entire hidden village called Hidden Sound Otoagakure, where she stored her experiments. She told him that she had laboratories all over the continent that served as her hideout when she wanted. Orochimaru had even told him of when she was in the Akatsuki, partnered with Kisame, making sure to warn him that it was probably Hoshigaki Kisame and Uchiha Itachi that would come after him. The older woman had even confided in the young boy that she was Ashitori Rishimaru's Experiment X-19. The evil scientist had created her out of his own cells and combined it with that of a reptile. It was inevitable that she would have a strong connection with snakes. He treated her, in some twisted way, like his own child, making sure she went to bed on time, got up early and ate her vegetables. He had told her that she was his most successful experiment, but the tests he kept putting her through. When the Mons lab had been raided, she was 6 years old then. The ninja had thought that she was an orphan Ashitori had kidnapped and was experimenting on.
They had placed her in the orphanage where she was treated like a freak. Even by her caretakers, her time in the academy was lonely and filled with hate for her fellow students as well as her time as a genin. When the Sandaime had picked her, Jiraiya and Tsunade to be his students, it looked like her life would get better, but it didn't. Jiraiya kept on making brash outbursts that hurt more than created any sense of camaraderie, and Tsunade was a spoiled brat. That time she had already set up a secret laboratory in the Forest of Death where she studied and experimented on people she kidnapped. It was when she was a chunin at 14 did something happen that changed her whole perception on humanity, or better yet, someone. She had found Minato violently shivering in the heavily pouring ice-cold rain as he moved from house to house. Asking the occupants for shelter, she had been late coming back to Konoha from a mission with her teammates, and she wasn't aware that she had also been standing in the rain. Watching the street urchin get the door slammed on his face by everyone he asked help from. She didn't know what compelled her that day to approach the boy and invite him to her house. Maybe she thought that she would end up killing him and studying his dead body, but despite giving Minato his own room to sleep in and food to eat, she couldn't, for the first time in her life, muster up the bloodlust in her to kill the 4-year-old boy. The torrential shower had done more harm than good for the young blonde boy, and Orochimaru still couldn't get her cold ruthlessness back into her when she looked into his wide, blue eyes silently pleading for her to keep him for longer. The genius girl managed to get the boy's health back up and was expecting him to be on his way, but he stayed. Minato never demanded much, he never raised his voice or disagreed with anything Orochimaru said to him. He just looked up at her with reflective blue orbs and did what she asked, which mostly consisted of things that were for his own good. Before she knew it, Minato was 8 and she had personally registered him for the academy under her name as his next of kin. She found out that he was the first person she could confide in. As stupid as that sounded, the only person that was able to ever sneak up on her and the first person to hug her when memories of her time with Ashitori returned in full force. The girl wasn't even aware of the fact that she had stopped experimenting on human beings after she had let him in. They had rubbed off of each other in more ways than one. Minato took interest in spiders and fuinjutsu, and Orochimaru now had a craving for ramen every once in a while. The snake Sannin was heartbroken when Minato had told her that her male teammate had noticed his skills in fuinjutsu, skills Orochimaru had already laid a foundation for, and was offering him an apprenticeship. He was already a shinobi by then, and a very promising one at that, so she couldn't bar him from doing what he wanted. The Namikaze always made sure to be back before sunset and had assured her that he wouldn't be moving out anytime soon. This was the only promise he broke. Then Minato had told her of his second crush, the first one being on Orochimaru. Boom. Shocker. Can you sense my sarcasm? On a former classmate, he began spending more time with the Uzumaki princess, and before the snake Sannin knew it, they were hitched and expecting their first child. The pale woman relapsed back into her cruel studies the first day Minato arrived at midnight after a date with Kushina. Telling her that he had to move out, she grew detached from him and the rest of the world. Feigned the fact that she didn't care anymore, but he never lost faith in her. Minato never stopped caring, so the day one of Orochimaru's labs was discovered and all of her vile experiments were brought to light. He blamed himself. Most would say that the Sandaime was the one that last saw Orochimaru leave, but it wasn't true. Minato had stubbornly chased after his surrogate sister, and they had, for the first time, had a fight that was outside a friendly spar. The Sannin had beat him within an inch of his life without an ounce of remorse on her face, and when it was time to impale his heart with a kunai, she couldn't. A single tear slipped out of her eyes as the rain poured down from the sky, eerily similar to the downpour she had first met and saved him from. And she apologized before she left him there on the ground. It was the last time he saw her. Years of desperately searching for his long-lost sister were all in vain. Despite the numerous times Jiraiya and Hiruzen told him that he was wasting his time, Orochimaru was a lost cause and that it was best for both him and Kushina if she stayed away. But the stubborn blonde man never listened. He had finally made a breakthrough in his search for the snake Sannin, but it clashed with the day his wife was giving birth to their first son. He pushed his mission back a few hours after Kushina had given birth to Naruto. He kept telling himself, but it never came. Kyuubi broke free and he died, sealing the great monster into his son. He took the guilt of never finding his sister to the grave. The rogue snake Sannin had been a secret witness to his burial. Knowledge of how close the Yondaime Hokage was with the rogue snake summoner was wiped out of Konoha's history books not even a week after the Kyuubi attack, and no one knew of the extents Minato Namikaze would take just so he could find Orochimaru. No one, that is, besides Kushina Uzumaki, Jiraiya of the Sannin, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Hitaki Kakashi, Yugo Uzuki and Orochimaru of the Sannin. Naruto and Orochimaru spoke to each other for so long and so freely that they weren't aware when they were facing each other with their knees touching and his right hand laced with her left. She was using her free hand to animatedly regale a tale of her epic escape from Snow Country after she had replicated a plan for their famed chakra armor. When it was midnight, Naruto used his own free hand to summon a clone and sent him off to cover his night shift in the CCTV room in the Forest of Death. The godmother and godson connected so well. They had similar likes, dislikes, hobbies, and even ambitions. It wouldn't come as a shock to anyone who watched that they had created a new form of secret communication by just gestures. Naruto listened with wide eyes as she told him of one of the times she had experimented on nature chakra on a human being, creating a Goliath man called Jugo. He had said that he had wanted to try the experiment on a human captive he had in his lab, Mizuki Toji, but hadn't found the time to do so. Nature chakra only works best with animals and animal summoners, Naruto piped in, and the woman nodded to what he said. I haven't tested it out on someone besides myself, but every book I read on it tells me the same thing. You should know not to blindly trust what a book says, the Sannin tutted. I know, he said, so what else did you plan to do in Konoha? The woman looked around conspiratorially, making Naruto quirk up the sides of his lips in amusement. I want to kill Sarutobi-sensei. Can I ask why? Here she threw her free hand in the air and sighed dramatically. Nearly everything wrong is his fault. He took Minato away, he brainwashed him, he kicked me out of Konoha, he tried to brainwash you too. Plus, I have a thorn to pick with him, personal stuff. Naruto nodded in understanding. Will you be coming with me after? He patted her hand. When things settle down, I need some time to get my affairs in order here. You're shutting down Kitsugami Drug Company. Not exactly. Aoki-chan has been tailing a former contact of mine for a while here in Konoha. She says she suspects the man is feeding the Hokage info on Kitsugami Gumo. That'll explain why last week 2 warehouses in Fire Country went off the radar and my workers there are in the T&I now. Do you think the man knows who you are? Only 2 people know who I am and they're trusted members of the criminal underworld. This was the same with his workers. Each and every one of them had been sworn to a never ask, never tell sort of secrecy, especially when it concerned their boss's identity. That way if they were caught they had the deniability card to pull without any problems. As rewards he would break them out of the T&I when he could. His former contact had broken this oath by becoming too inquisitive. He fired him and cut him off from the Kitsugami Drug Company before he could do any damage. Orochimaru listened to him lay his problems out patiently, and that was when he really looked at her. She had black circles under her eyes and her shoulders sagged even more than normal. She had a tired air about her. Even though she had on a lot of clothes on, he still noticed that she was thinner than how the bingo books depicted her. Her lips were thinner, the black lines going down the corner of her eyes were now prominent and well past her nose, and she had his custom-made painkillers with her. She noticed him slow down in what he was saying and his eyes drooped behind his goggles just before he stopped. She observed him, and when he couldn't meet her eyes it dawned on her. So you know, huh? How long do you have? He asked. 3 years, she said quietly and sighed. It would have been longer, but my fight with Itachi took a bigger toll on me than I thought. She gently squeezed his hand when they began to shake. What is it? He knew that trying to convince her not to go ahead with her planned assassination attempt wouldn't work. If there was one thing in the bingo book that every other countries could relate with concerning her, it was that she was deathly determined when she set her mind on something. It's a rare one. I haven't found a name for it yet, but it's like a cancer of the heart. I found out 10 years ago, but I've had it since I was born. He still wasn't looking at her. There's no cure. There has to be something. Maybe I can know, but no, she shook her head. I have to do something. He yelled. He lifted his goggles up and used his forearm to rub the tears building up there. He placed them back on quickly. I have to do something. I am sorry, Naruto-kun, it's too late. He didn't say anything. Rather, he kept looking out of the window to the slowly rising sun. Killing the Sandaime is on my bucket list, but meeting you was the first thing on it. She gently raised her right hand and slowly placed his goggles on his forehead. Revealing his wet crimson-red vulpine eyes, she shuffled closer. If that's even possible, and looked at him with her yellow snake-like eyes. Teaching you everything I know is the last thing. She placed a small kiss on his forehead and hugged him.
Another thing he had gained from the spider summon's DNA in his body was that he had gotten 4 more additional eyes, the 4 dots on his forehead, that were able to see the world in incredible detail even though his hair blocked them. Those eyes equalized the light that entered his real eyes by already giving him an image of how something was supposed to be. Brighter dim lighting, the 2 dots on his nose served as his second noses.
They only served to amplify his sense of smell and perception of his environment if he was, by some crazy chance, blinded by an overload to his sight. Who else knows? Naruto muttered into her chest. He clenched the clothes at her side in his fist and buried his head in even more. I think Kabuto-kun suspects something, but you're the first and only person he'll tell. I'll get my affairs in order and join you as fast as I can, he muffled out. Take your time, she said and kissed the top of his head. I need to go now, things to do, people to see. He nodded in her chest and pulled away from her. Wait, how are you going to get close enough to the Hokage to kill him? I am posing as the cage, and I have my sound 4 create a barrier so no one disturbs, she said as she stood up. When that day comes, if any of my shinobi or sand shinobi come after your life, kill them if you want. I don't really mind what happens to them. He nodded and she put her hand on the front door handle. How did you get in anyway? Even Jiraiya hasn't been able to do that. She smirked a little and replied, when I stabbed you, I stashed some of your blood away. The boy chuckled and rolled his eyes. Of course you did. He waved and she opened the front door, not even letting the light fall on her completely before she melted into a pile of mud. He suspected her silver-haired apprentice, Kabuto, was already outside. He felt Aoki's presence behind him and ever so gently she took his right hand in both of hers. Her katana was leaning on the wall leading to the kitchen, and squeezed it in some sort of way to comfort him. He took in a slow, deep breath and let it out just as slow. Aoki-chan's story. The day after Orochimaru's visit, the black-haired rank swordswoman was standing in front of a see-through container that had a rare snow leopard caged in it. Her trusty katana was sheathed and held firmly in her red obi while she tapped the glass twice, once to wake up the animal and another to get it angry. As expected, it lunged at her, but it was pushed back when its claws hit the reinforced glass wall. It always surprised her how her current master was well connected. He had proven to her that if he wanted something he would most certainly get it through any means necessary. She didn't flinch when she felt her master step beside her, seemingly out of nowhere. That was another thing about him. Ever since he had infused his queen spider's DNA into himself, he had become even more stealthy. Whether that was his initial intention or not, a year of working for him loyally had told her that he only harmed those he deemed too dangerous to associate with. The money he gave her on a monthly basis was mouth-watering and the freedom he allowed her was very well appreciated, but it was the fact that if she ever attempted to assassinate him and failed. She closed her eyes and sighed. She didn't want to think about it. Even though every other assassination she had personally done was a success, she had a niggling feeling that the Uzumaki spider summoner had somehow found a way to cheat death. Naruto put his hands into his hoodie's pockets and spoke, "Beautiful, isn't she?" Aoki nodded in agreement. Her blonde master had always shown her that there could be beauty in everything. All it took was seeking it out. Hi, she is. I bought her off a Fang country merchant that wanted to use her as meat for his dogs. That was last time we went for the Baron's meeting. I don't remember seeing you buy her. Oh, it was already pre-arranged. All I had to do was give him the money and hell give me the leopard. Her mouth opened in a small O and it dropped with the next things he said to her, and happy birthday. You remembered. She turned to him sharply with shock visible in her eyes. Naruto only looked at her with the corner of his eyes before they returned to the animal. She knew this because his goggles were perched on his forehead. I rarely ever forget. He pulled out his right hand from his pocket and presented a small box wrapped up neatly in white and yellow wrapping paper with a tag that read her name. I got this for you. When she hesitated, he turned to her and gently placed the package in her hands with a small smile on his face. You have the day off. He patted her shoulder. He was much taller than her. And went off into the lab, probably to exit through the front door so he could train. Her hands shook as she looked at the hand-sized box in her hands. Then she put her ear to it and shook it gently. It didn't rattle. She gingerly opened the box and found a small sealing scroll inside. She unsealed what was inside and her eyes widened in wonder as a magnificently crafted white wood and silver bow that had delicately drawn snow leopards on the silver edges, doubling up as cutting edges, dropped into her hands that had a letter attached to it. The letter was in Naruto's handwriting and it said, "The last ones you owned broke when you fought Nifune. I promise these are just as good. They were crafted by a Kiryogakure blacksmith and carpenter at my request. The wood is gotten from a sunbeam tree at high noon, when it is its strongest, and the silver is chakra metal I got from Snow Country. I have personally placed the durability and regeneration seals on it so it wouldn't break easily, and if it does it would snap back together. I hope you like it, Naruto." She stashed the note into her short pants pocket and excitedly tested the bow, pulling it as far as it could go, and marveled on how tense but at the same time flexible it was. She bit her bottom lip to contain a giggle and she hurried outside to thank her new master. She found Naruto balanced on a long spike from the earth, holding 2 long senbon in both of his hands, 2 behind his knees, and going through what she recognized as the kata for his 6-legged shadow spider taijutsu stance in his stealth uniform besides the Junin flak jacket and his launchers. The young boy noticed her and hopped off the spike. Aoki composed herself and bowed deeply to him. "Thank you, Naruto-sama, it was no problem," he replied with a fleeting smile, before he pointed out, "You still have the day off though, you deserve it. I have something to tell you, yes?" He retrieved the senbon at the back of his knees and slipped them into their pouch, and then he began to idly tinker with his nifty silver launchers. "No one knows why I challenged Nifune to an honorable fight to the death. I want to tell you the reason." She easily slid the bow across her body and was squeezing the comfortable grip in her hands. "You don't need to if you don't want to," he said. "No, I want to tell you. I want to trust you, Naruto-sama," she quietly said, and Naruto looked at her for a minute before he silently ushered her into the lab and then to the animal containment area. "But only if you trust me, Naruto-sama." Naruto laughed silently. "The fact I allow you to hold a weapon, the elemental blade for that matter, whenever you stand behind me is proof I trust you. Plus, I got you another weapon." He stood with his back leaning on the railing in front of a chimpanzee enclosure. She nodded slowly and began her story from the very beginning. Aoki's first memory was of seeing a black-haired woman wearing a Kiryogakure forehead protector hastily dropping her in front of the Iron Country orphanage. This was probably when she was 2 or 3 years old. The old matron had found her on the steps, crying to the sky with all her worth, with a wrapped package clenched strongly in her fists. The package specified that what it contained should not be directly touched or death would come swiftly. The woman, obligated to take in every orphan brought to her, took Aoki in and found a single note in. The little girl only wore a simple pair of white shorts and pink shirt. Inside her pants pocket was a single note that read Aoki, which she assumed was her name. The orphans in the Iron Country orphanage were all to be raised in the way of the samurai, irrespective of gender, and when a weekly inspection was conducted by the Iron Country leader, Bifune, he walked in on a spar between Aoki and another orphan. Both making use of bokken to fight, the 6-year-old child mercilessly hacked and slashed against her opponent's wooden training sword, not giving the slightly older girl any time to create any coherent plan, and with a short jab and a poke from behind her the girl was disarmed and lying on the ground, helpless. Aoki went through the motions of sheathing her wooden sword and bowed to her downed opponent, then to her class instructor, then to her matron, and finally, after recovering from her shock, to the Iron Country leader. That single match raised the Mont's interest in her. So far the orphans in Iron Country were not very motivated. The small child walked briskly to the edge of the sparring mat where the rest of her classmates were kneeling down, and she too joined in. Her head was tilted down and her right hand was clenched on her wooden sword, ready to draw at a moment's notice, but still keeping an eye on the new sparring opponents on the mat. She was fully clad in beginner's samurai uniform, a pure white kimono that reached close to the ground and was tied at the waist by a white sash. Her short black hair was tied together into a short ponytail, but it still allowed 2 fang-like bangs to go down to her chin. After the usual training session she prepared to leave, but she had been expressly told by her class instructor to stay back. She remained on her knees and her eyes stayed on the mat until she heard the specific sound of a bow being drawn. Her head snapped up and her bokken slashed upwards, catching an arrow and deflecting it to the ceiling. She spun on her feet and crossed the weapon across her chest as another arrow was sent at her. The arrow clanked against the wooden weapon. She gripped her wooden weapon tightly with both hands and lowered herself into the beginning stance of the samurai fighting style her class was being instructed in. Her coal-black eyes looked around the empty room frantically. The dojo was quiet until she heard slow clapping coming from the door. "At ease, child," Bifune called to her, and she again went through the motions of smoothly sheathing her bokken when she saw him. Rarely anyone is able to deflect arrows. Even though they were not fully drawn, she quietly shrugged. "You, my child, are special. I wish to be your teacher." "It would be an honor, Lord Bifune," she said and bowed deeply. He clapped his hand on her shoulder, his face ever stoic, and said, "Go and get your things, you will be staying in my residence." She quickly blinked away the tears that filled her eyes and bowed again before she rushed to get the few clothes she had, and collected her package from the head matron. Training under the Iron Country leader alongside his older sons, who were already in their mid-20s, was very hard. The expectations Bifune piled on her to be able to do things most wouldn't be able to do at her age weighed down on her small shoulders, but she didn't complain. Not even once. She took her training like a loyal Iron Country samurai. Soon enough she was formally adopted into the royal family and witnessed the first time Bifune, the usually stoic man, gave her a small, almost invisible smile. Mifune, the second child to the leader, welcomed his adopted sister with open arms and treated the girl with due respect, but Nifune, the oldest child, remained adamant that she was not welcomed. When the old Iron Country leader was on his deathbed from lung infection, Aoki was 15. Then the old leader had acclaimed her as the strongest of his children as well as the next leader of Iron Country. A title most expected the old man to pass on to Nifune. The oldest child, Aoki took the shock in stride and accepted the mantle in front of the elders, but the ceremony would not be official until the next day. That night, though, Nifune snuck into her room, using an outlawed ninjutsu to do so. It's a ninja technique. Of course it's outlawed, and attempted to rape the 15-year-old girl as revenge for stealing what he believed was his birthright. And was very well close to sealing the deal. He had placed his hand over her mouth and used his free hand to tear off her light sleeping clothes, but she had managed to bite his hand and run for dear life. When she had gotten her hand on her weapon, the all-elemental katana, from her closet and turned around, he was nowhere to be found. The only evidence of his presence was the smell of his thick cologne. Aoki didn't even wait until sunrise before she raised hell through the royal family residence. Bifune had already passed on, so it was Mifune, the second-born and more compassionate brother, that managed to calm the girl down. Aoki was too ashamed to tell her brother what had happened to her. Her pride and honor as a samurai had been soiled, and she was out for blood, Nifune's blood in particular. Despite the known fact that Aoki trusted Mifune, she didn't tell him what had happened to her, why she was running through the residence in her training clothes and her katana crackling with energy. She used her position as next in line to be leader to declare a death match between her and Nifune to be held immediately. It was after this declaration did Nifune finally rear out his head from his hiding place. At the crack of dawn, citizens of Iron Country that lived close to the capital assembled at the Grand Iron Arena to witness the fight, which was basically just a wide, open field. The rules were simple. The only survivor won, but at the same time the winner would be branded with the title of Rogue Samurai. He or she was given a full day to flee from Iron Country before he or she was placed into the bingo book with all of her money in the dueler's bank accounts frozen. Among Bifune's children, Nifune, the oldest, was the weakest when it came to skill and strength. Even his loyalty to Iron Country was on shaky ground. Mifune was the second strongest in the way of the samurai, and Aoki was the strongest in every aspect. Aoki had been dubbed by the people of Iron Country as the Dark Angel of the Five Elements because of her black hair and eyes, as well as because of her katana blade. The Omniogen, or the Elemental Blade, rumored to have been forged deep in the mountains of Demon Country by a lava release user using the heart of a demon wolf as the blade and its hide as its sheath. The katana had been stored in Demon Country, protected by the elders, until the person it deemed worthy claimed it, but it had been stolen by a cunning woman that wrapped it up in thick leather and vanished off the face of the earth as soon as the alarms rang throughout the Demon Mountain. How it had come into the possession of Aoki was a mystery, but apparently it had already formed a bond with the girl. Any other person that touched it would be sucked dry of his chakra, and his very essence would leave his body and enter the sword, forever spiraling in the deep, dark silvery abyss that was in the sword. While Aoki would be able to draw strength from the unfortunate soul trapped in her sword, it was remarkable that she had been able to master the katana under the tutelage of Bifune. Aoki walked into the middle of the arena, decked out in full traditional samurai armor. White torso, thigh and helmet and yellow shoulder guards. shin guards and sandals, her undercloth was black. Sheathed to her side was her omniogen, and across her back was a plain wooden bow with a full quiver of arrows. Nifune too walked in from the other side of the arena in full traditional samurai armor that was gold in color. The people watching at the sidelines waited with bated breath as both fighters stared down at each other, until the appointed future leader of the country rocketed forward and whipped her sword at her opponent, not wanting to give the older man any chance to speak.
Nifune, although the weakest of the three siblings, was also reputed for being the wielder of the gold katana blade Baifun's father had passed on to Baifun, but the late leader had found the weapon hard to use, so he gave it to his son, favoring the use of another mystical katana blade. Nifune was a tall man with bald hair and a brown goatee, usually choosing to wear gold and walk around pompously. He had mastered the use of the gold katana easily. He often called himself the golden sibling.
The man used his weapon to block the lethal strike as well as the subsequent hacks from the enraged girl. He slipped past a strike and shoulder-checked the smaller girl to the ground. Following this with a stomp from sandal-clad foot, the girl rolled away and fired a barrage of arrows after she quickly sheathed her blade. The man easily sliced them out of the air and darted at her. Aoki slid away from his downward slice and ducked the head slash. Then she used her bow to deflect a sword stroke successfully, using her foot to Spartan kick the big man away. The man quickly recovered and brought his leg up to block a smash from her bow, breaking the wooden weapon and forcing the girl to throw it away so she should dodge a slash from him. She raised her sheathed katana to block his gold katana, and the action pushed her back, breaking the ground apart. When she stopped, she half unsheathed her blade and snapped it back in fully. Earth pulse. The ground reverberated under her and a small tidal wave made up completely of earth washed towards the older man. Nifune smirked to himself and created a hole in the earth wave as it came at him. Leaping through, Aoki met him before his feet hit the ground with an upward slash of her omniogen, forcing him to support his katana with both of his hands to block the attack. One behind the blade, another on the handle, she feinted a slice to his side. And he followed her motion, but when he saw her correct her motion and go for his shoulder, it was too late. White smoke flowed off her katana, channeling wind chakra, and she cut through his armor like butter, lopping off his arm. He slithered away, but she stubbornly followed him, wisps of wind coming off her blade ominously as she jabbed it at his stomach. He clanged his sword against hers twice desperately, losing a lot of blood fast. The third jab she went for, she commanded the wind wisps to elongate her weapon, and this effectively allowed her to slice through his gold armor and into his heart. She harshly pulled out her weapon, making the older man drop his own in shock that she had managed to get to him. And she spun around so she could cut off his head smoothly. His head flew off and rolled on the ground, an eternally horrified expression on his face. While Aoki smoothly sheathed her own katana, her expression grim. She didn't look up at Mifune when he stepped in front of her. He brought out his own katana, the adamantium chakra blade, and smoothly cut a clean line through the Iron Country symbol on her helmet, then to the two symbols on her shoulder guards. Then he finally sheathed his sword and turned around. Every other member of the country that was present, from the most professional samurai to the lowliest of civilians, stood up and turned their backs to her. All were silent. Aoki swallowed thickly and left the arena so she could pack up her things and leave Iron Country. Most speculated that it was the pressure of expectation that had broken her. Others thought that the power had gone to her head. All the same, no one found out what really pushed Aoki to do what she did. Life as a missing ninja was hard, and she had to kill her conscience so she would be able to get the money for the next meal. She had been contacted by a slavery ring, and a heavy price for her services was presented to her. A price she couldn't refuse. The job had forced her to wear clothes she didn't want to wear and even speak in a way she herself detested, but she desperately needed the money. Though she drew the line on selling her body, any advances from the ninja that work for her former slave ring owner boss was met with violent repercussions. This went on for a year until Naruto came. Thanks for watching.